I want to welcome you to this episode of Retro Rogues Live. Please pay attention to our fancy warning graphic. It tells you that the Retro Rogues Live show is intended for an adult audience and not intended for children under the age of 13. Parental discretion is advised. So we have a very special show for you tonight. I hope you're ready to deep dive. I hope you're ready to help us course correct. We're going to be talking about Star Trek Picard here at the beginning of the show. And we are going to be doing our Rogues Writers Room panel here a little bit later. So I want to welcome actually to the show. I want to welcome PJ from Orville Nation. PJ, thank you for being on the show. Very cool.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me,
thank you for being on the show. I want to, of course, welcome back, obviously, our fantastic co-host. This is Mr. Eric Alexander.
Hello, everyone. Yes, I am Eric Alexander, also known as Bass God 14. That's not Bass God 14. That's Bass God 14, like a bass guitar.
So I do want to talk to PJ just real quickly here. So PJ, could you tell the folks hopefully watching or listening at home some of the fun things that you do over there at Orville Nation?
Yeah, so we are a sci-fi channel that is focused primarily on the Orville, but we actually talk about everything. We talk about Star Wars, we talk about Battlestar Galactica, Stargate, even comics a little bit. I mean, we talk about a lot of stuff, but yeah, first and foremost, everybody's a fan of the Orville and Trek, and we've had Dave and Eric on before, and it's just a blast every time you guys are on.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for being here on the show. Please, Eric, tell the folks either watching or listening at home, maybe some of the fun things you've done just briefly as a creative professional.
Thank you, Dave. Well, I am the associate producer of the feature film Occupants, which features Star Trek Voyager actor Robert Picardo, and is actually currently streaming on Tubi for free, which we will actually be talking about Tubi later in our Road to Perdition segment.
Very cool. So for those of you that may not be familiar with me, my name is Dave Beatty. I've been a professional illustrator and graphic designer for nearly 30 years. Worked on a lot of fun things that some people have heard of, such things as Batman Incorporated, Justice League of America, Superboy and Legion of Superheroes. And I'm going to stop right there because we really don't need to get too far into that minutia. But what I do want to do real quickly is I want to plug. We are, again, encouraging people, please comment during the show. If you comment during the show, you can be entered into a drawing to win an original art sketch card. Now, the way this basically works is please be over the age of 18 and within the United States, just because I have to fill out these pesky forms in order to get it to you. And it's just a little bit more hassle for me. Eventually, we will stop doing that, and I'll just ship all over the world. But as it currently stands, it's just a little bit more convenient for me to ship in the United States right now. So we've got a whole bunch to pick from here tonight. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this, so I'm going to go really fast because I need people to, hopefully here at the beginning of the show, I need you to tell me what one you might be interested in. I'm going to narrow this down just a little bit because there's simply too many to pick from. I'm going to pick the ones I know people are probably most interested in. Okay, so this will be the big one you could possibly win this evening. This is, I've got a new light here, so I'm trying to put the best way to do this. So this is actually... Well, that's kind of hard to see, isn't it? I
can see it okay.
Okay. So this is actually an official Marvel's Greatest Battles. This was actually a published set from Rittenhouse. I actually drew this live on Facebook a couple nights ago. This is Iron Fist versus Daredevil. It's actually two cards basically in one. And what would happen is they would actually cut them apart. So when they're done, it'd actually be two. So this is an uncut sheet. This is an official artist proof. This is from leftover from when I worked on the set back in 2012. So we have this. This is one you could possibly win this evening. In addition to that, I'm going to hit the high points here. We're going to do the Batman one again. This is, of course, just a classic Batman comic book. This is on our Retro Rogues cardstock. We have Batman the Animated Series for this evening. I did this live a couple nights ago on Facebook. You could actually... maybe select this one. Again, it's on our official stock. And then Eric liked this one. I'm not happy with how it turned out, but it seems like a lot of people like it. So we also have a classic Punisher, again, on our official stock. So what I need people to do here at the beginning of the show, real quick, tell me what you would like to actually win. And then towards the end of the show, we will pick one. So we have here, we've got either a comic book Batman, animated Batman, Punisher, or we have actually here this is Iron Fist versus Daredevil on a 2-card special kind of thing. So we just need people, please chime in, tell me what you're most interested in. I'll talk about that again later, but you can see it takes up a lot of important showtime, so I don't want to dwell on it too much. All right, so enough about that.
I know I don't have an official vote, but I do really like the Batman animated, and I also really like, as you mentioned, I like the Punisher. I think the Punisher actually came out pretty good.
Very cool. I don't know. I think the Batman, the comic book Batman's the nicest one, in my opinion. I think that one turned out the nicest. What about you, PJ? Do you have a vote here? If you're gonna pick one?
I like the first one.
Oh, okay. Okay, so you like the Iron Fist versus Daredevil, the big crazy battle? Okay.
I like that.
All right. So again, please, viewers, please help us figure out what we're going to do. And so enough about that. Let's go ahead and get on into the show.
Bobby, I actually thought about that. Bobby Chambers says he was hoping I would have a mask on this week. And by the way, his vote is for the Punisher. Bobby, you got good taste. I like the Punisher. Dave said he didn't like it. I think it's awesome. But yeah, I thought about doing that. I actually did think about wearing a mask, and maybe I will in a future episode. But it has to be wrong. That's the only thing is I actually do have some actual N95 masks, surgical masks. I even have a gas mask. I need like a wrong mask though for it to work. It has to be like a mask that's not going to help me at all. You know what I mean? Otherwise, it's a joke. So.
And I don't know if PJ knows, but I was actually wearing a luchador mask last show.
I saw it. It was awesome, dude. I was flipping through the YouTube and I was like, I think I was getting ready for bed or something. And I was like, I did a double take. I was like, what is he wearing? And I went back and watched you guys for a while.
It was fun.
Yeah,
it was fun.
Dave was told he had to wear a mask, but he didn't quite do it right. So.
And then I have like a Batman cowl, and I've got a few other things. So I'm thinking about maybe, down the road, I might do that every once in a while just to be fun. So, cool. All right, so, very cool. So, do we want to get into our main topic for this evening? I do have a show graphic in case we want to put it up. Okay, so we're going to start the show off. We're going to be talking about Star Trek Picard. Et in Arcadia Ego Part 2. I may not be pronouncing that correctly. Apologies if I'm not. And at the same point, we're going to talk about the finale, but we're also going to get into just the show, I think, just overall in general. We want to talk about general impressions. I think at this point, it's okay to talk general impressions for the first season of Picard in total. So let's just go ahead and get it out there. I know some people have not been thrilled with Picard, I imagine there's some people out there that liked it. I see people posting about it, but they don't actually come on the show and actually talk about it. So we'll kind of see how this goes. So I'm going to start with our guest. Please, PJ, tell me what are your overall general impressions of the finale episode of Star Trek Picard?
Well, as you guys know, I'm not a big fan of this current, trend of Trek. I do think Picard is better than Discovery, and I don't want to get into this whole debate now. That's not really your question, but I want to just give a background on my position, my perspective. I mean, so I thought actually it could have been worse, to be honest. So I thought it could have been worse. I thought that there were some decisions made that were, debatable, but I do think that there was a lot of people disappointed with the ending. I feel that they try to do something cute there, where Brent Spiner now is playing a human, and now Picard is playing an AI. The body, well, he's not. I don't know. It's not really clear if it's really him in the body or not. But anyway, I thought it was okay. It could have been worse, but I did not like it too much. What did you guys think?
Well, yeah, let's go ahead and throw it over to Eric. So tell me, Eric, what was your general impression of the finale episode of Star Trek Picard?
Well, it's kind of, I feel like a broken record. Once again, I have to talk about the uneven nature of the pacing, the uneven nature of the tone. There are moments that are meant to obviously be very serious, but they're like punctuated by moments that are almost like slapstick. Angus really annoys the heck out of me. I hate that character. And she's just really annoying because she literally is like psychotic and bipolar. She's like really goofy one minute, and of course she's murdering people the next. And I just can't get over that. I can't get over that. The fact that she is a cold-blooded murderer, and that all of a sudden she's just like this goofy, she's nerdy, she's like, she's cool. I mean, it's just, I can't take it. I can't take it. I think she's beat Raffi as my favorite character. You know what I mean? I had a lot of issues with Raffi, and now Agnes is my favorite character.
Can I ask you a question, Eric? Do you mind?
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you remember? It was really concerning to me, the fact that in the last episode, I think it was episode 9, that Picard is in sickbay and he's like sleeping and sick. Well, he's unconscious in sickbay, and they leave him there with her
alone.
And the last person she was taking care of, she murdered.
Right. Yeah. It doesn't. One of the things that I pointed out is this show. I say this all the time. Continuity is the enemy of lazy writers. And these guys are so lazy, they will not even follow their own continuity. We've established, like you said, that Agnes murdered Maddox because she was left alone with them. She had the opportunity, so she did. So what does the motley crew do? They leave Agnes alone with Picard, in sickbay.
And Maddox was her lover.
Right, that was her lover. That's right, that was her lover. And like I said, they don't even follow their own continuity. They establish something in one episode, and then the next episode we're supposed to just forget that. We're just supposed to forget that happened. And then I heard Kurtzman was piping off about how there's no way you could maintain 50 years of continuity in Star Trek. That's impossible. Yeah, it's impossible, you hack, because you can't even do it in your own show. You can't even follow what you established, from one episode to the next. That kind of stuff is just, I don't understand. It's lazy writing. It's hack writing. It's like the worst television stereotype kind of writing. The worst Hollywood tropes. And again, like 1 minute things are supposed to be kind of like solemn, and you're supposed to be kind of like feeling something. It's very clear what they want you to feel, and then the next minute it kind of goes in a different direction, and you're like, what are you trying to do to me here? It's just very incoherent. I don't know, Dave, what do you think?
Well, I'm gonna kind of actually fall in the same camp as PJ. It could have been worse. My overall impression of this episode is actually gonna actually just stem to the whole first season of Picard. It was all right, I guess. That's my whole review. It's just one of those things. It's like there was so much potential. There was so much more that they could have done. I saw people after we theorized it, actually on our show when we did our soft launch of the writer's room, because I talked about it'd be fun if the ancient AI was related to Ruck from that episode, What Little Girls Are Made Of. I may be getting the episode title wrong, but of course played by Ted Cassidy, and he kept referring to the race that created him and left them there. He kept calling them the old ones. Like I kept thinking, it's like it'd be fun if that classic Trek ancient synthetic, civilization would be connected to this, because we don't really know much about that ancient.
Dave, you can't possibly have continuity with 50 years of Trek. I mean, that's just impossible, Dave. That's just not possible. You're crazy, man. You're crazy. You just can't do that. You're going back like
Right.
50 years ago. You're crazy, man. You're crazy.
But so that's kind of my thing. There was some things I liked. I was shocked to learn that, and again, we don't get too heavy into spoilers right now. I was shocked to learn.
Dave, I want to go back to what you were talking about with that episode, What Little Girls Are Made Of. That's a great example of how Kurtzman doesn't know what he's talking about. This is a guy that doesn't like Star Trek. He could have incorporated, as you said, something directly from the original series into Star Trek Picard, tied it into the continuity very easily without changing any of the story, and just had that nod to the original series. But his attitude is that's impossible. You can't do it. It's impossible.
Yeah. I just feel like that's unfortunate, and I was shocked to learn. Again, we don't want to get too heavy into spoilers right now, but I was shocked to learn that the moment I kind of enjoyed the most in this entire episode apparently wasn't even supposed to happen. Apparently, it was a last-minute change. They had something completely different planned.
Riker?
And I was shocked. I was like, "What do you mean that wasn't originally planned? You were going to have the foul-mouthed admiral come on there, and was she going to tell the Zot Vosh to F off? Like, she sure loves to do that. Why I guess she should have showed up and told him to F off. Why not? She told everybody else to F off. I feel like she told me to F off. Anyhow. So
yeah, let's just get into the deep dive because we're already into it. So
right.
We're talking about Riker, right? We're talking about the inclusion of Riker, which I think is the universal moment that almost every fan, even if they hate Star Trek Picard, they at least liked Riker showing up. But I want to point out that there's still a huge problem with that. There's a huge problem with that, okay? First, there's a lot of problems with it. But the number one problem to me is just not understanding the simple concept of he's a captain who was in the reserves, and up until like yesterday, I mean, it's only been like 2 days, he was sitting in his cabin on that other planet.
Right.
Not a lot of time has passed. He said he was on the active reserve list. Okay. Which, I guess that would be the equivalent in our society of a drilling reservist, 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year. I don't know exactly how Starfleet does it, but he did say active reserve, and that's how active reserve works here. Okay. And then the next thing you know, he is commanding the entire Starfleet, essentially, like the whole fleet, which, by the way, they're all the same ship, which just irritated the heck out of me. That they couldn't even design new ships. It was one ship that looked like the Enterprise E to me. I mean, it looked exactly like, there's some differences, I think, but it looked like the Enterprise E to me. And he's a captain. Okay, all they had to do was establish at least that he was an admiral and he's in the reserve at least. I mean, again, they don't follow their own continuity. He's a captain. He wouldn't be in charge of the entire Federation fleet. He's not an admiral. Captains are not in charge of multiple ships, except in extreme circumstances. So
Eric,
he would have to be an admiral.
But Captain Picard has assumed command of a fleet as the captain of the flagship.
As I mentioned, that's because it was in the midst of a battle where the command ship was destroyed. So that's even within Trek. Like in First Contact, for instance, when they're fighting the Borg, Picard assumes command of the fleet because the command ship has been destroyed, and he's the most senior captain there. So that makes sense. That makes complete sense. If there's nobody else higher than him, then it makes sense for him to take command. But the fact of the matter is, traditionally, if you're in command of multiple ships, you're an admiral. There are exceptions to the rule, but generally you're an admiral. And all they had to do was say that Riker was an admiral. But I still think it doesn't make any sense that 2 days ago, or 1 day ago, yesterday, basically, he was sitting on his cabin, twiddling his thumbs, and now he's in charge of the entire Federation fleet. That doesn't make any logical sense. That doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't. And like you said, Dave, we know they basically just threw that in there. And that's why it doesn't make any sense, because they threw that in there as a feel-good moment, which it was nice. I'll tell you this. Frakes does look good in that captain's chair, in my opinion, okay? I think he looked good in that uniform. I think he looked good in that role. He's still got that swagger, that Will Riker swagger in the chair. I liked it. I'm not saying I don't like it. I'm just saying that it didn't make any sense. And that's my point is like, I've always said that this show is like puzzle pieces that they're trying to force together that don't actually connect. And so you've got like one little moment that's kind of cool, but it doesn't fit any of the rest of the narrative. It doesn't fit what we've already been told. It's been established that Riker's been sidelined. He says it. Why is he all of a sudden in charge of the entire Federation fleet?
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense to me.
And I think the thing that drove me the most berserk was that they did just kind of have, it looked like every single ship looked exactly the same. And all I could think of is all I could think of is I know they have different looking ships that they should have been able to use for that scene because they've got that Star Trek, Starfleet battles game. I keep seeing advertised on every single mobile device. And because they weren't featuring them, they don't have to have them front and center. But I know they've got, a bunch of CGI models that they could have just, kind of lit and threw around in the background. Even and because it's been established in Next Gen, they could have even had some even older ships from other things that they've used. I mean, just to kind of fill the scene so that there was more variety and it felt more like an actual active Starfleet as opposed to this manufactured moment.
Right. You basically copied and pasted the same ship over and over, and they did the same thing with the Romulans. Why couldn't we have seen a couple of the Romulan ships from the TNG era? They showed us a classic bird of prey that was actually in Picard. Why couldn't there have been some of those? One thing I really hate, and J.J. Abrams did the same thing in the last Star Wars film. I hate this thing where they feel like if I fill the screen with ships, that's like really awesome. To me, it's just confusing and stupid because it's like at some point you lose what's going on. And then, of course, these guys, I mean, this is not like watching Return of the Jedi where you can freeze frame and you can see a Mon Cal cruiser and a Star Destroyer doing broadsides on each other, and you would have missed it if you didn't freeze frame it. They're not doing that kind of stuff. This is like cut and paste. They just fill the screen with ships, and you're supposed to be like, wow. You know what I mean? Like, wow, look at all those ships that all look exactly the same. And I'm supposed to be impressed because the screen is filled with them.
Did you want to share that picture? Eric?
Say hi, Dave. Yeah, I can show you a picture, PJ. Now look at that.
Like, if you look at this. Look at that. Yeah.
Now, is this when they're first warping in?
I don't know when this is, but there's a couple. Yeah, it's just like there's.
This is from Picard, right?
This is from the 10th episode of Picard. Yeah.
I'm gonna blow this up because I couldn't see it all that well at first. So, yeah, I can't see any difference between the ships.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's another thing is it was very hard to see any detail on the ships to begin with. They made the images very quick. And there was no fighting. You have all these ships that's supposed to be impressive. And we never get to see the Romulan and Starfleet ships fight each other. Doesn't happen. It's just a standoff. Dave, your mic is off.
I was just going to say, sorry, my bad. I was just going to say that when I first saw Riker, when he showed up in his ship, and then we saw the other ships zooming in, I thought they were going to do that kind of same scenario because it looked like they were kind of equal forces. And so what I thought was going to happen is, in classic Riker style, he's going to be like, oh, well, we're not here alone, and then you'd see like the cloaking devices come off and you'd see like Klingon warships maybe flanking them or something, and you hear the da-da, and then you'd realize it's like, okay, well, the Romulans have clearly written a check that they can't cash. And it's just not, no matter how bad they want to destroy this planet, it's not happening today because the Federation, has basically said we're not doing this. but it was just weird. It was Riker, and I was happy to see Riker. I thought it was cool to see him in command. But it did look like it was just the same ship, copy and pasted all over the place. And I just felt like it kind of cheapened the moment for me.
No, I couldn't agree more. And it was just kind of silly. I mean, the way that the Commander Oh No just kept delaying the attack and just kept delaying it. And she kept saying silly things like, begin, planetary plan 5 annihilation and stuff like, I mean, just like, we're talking like 40 serial type lines. I mean, it was just bad dialogue. I mean, it just didn't make any sense. In my mind too, it's like, we're talking about, like one little village. Now, granted, the Romulans may not know how many synths there are, how, all that kind of stuff, but it's just massive overkill, the amount of ships that they have to destroy this tiny little settlement, and then the fact that the Federation basically brings their entire fleet as well to this planet that is not a Federation member. In fact, even, again, going back to their own continuity, what Picard does is he says, we should establish diplomatic relations. Establishing diplomatic relations doesn't mean they're suddenly like in NATO and we are going to invest our entire fleet to protect these people when Starfleet wouldn't do that for the Romulans when their star went supernova. It's like nothing makes sense even within the continuity of the show, because we've already had things established where, quote unquote, the Federation is turning their back. This is not, this is not the Federation that we grew up with. This is a different Federation. And they're not following those rules. Now, all of a sudden, the entire fleet is willing to put themselves on the line for a bunch of synths that want to destroy everybody. And that's the other thing that really irks me. These, up until basically the last minute, the synths are planning to destroy all organic life in the galaxy. That's their plan. And yet, Picard seems to be like, oh, well, I'm going to put this all on Soji. This is a great plan. I'm gonna let Soji decide the fate of the entire galaxy. Does that make any sense? I'm going to allow one person, based on her, intuition and the fact that I think that she's a good person at heart. You know what I mean? I'm going to let her decide when she's in the middle of building the communication device to call in the synths to kill them all. That's the plan. That's the plan. Excuse me?
Let me just say that the communication device looked like a new Guggenheim Museum, by the way. It was just like this. It didn't look anything like a communication device.
Well, and again, it goes back to the fact that like from a design standpoint, I don't understand what they're like. They've got the weird flower things. I kept expecting to see, like, since they had these crazy space flowers to defend the planet, I kept expecting to see more organic, amorphous, kind of this, a 60s style sci-fi, modern interpretation of, it's weird because with the flowers, I told Eric on the previous episode, I didn't have a huge problem with the flowers if they would just follow up the design concept in the settlement some sort of way. If we'd see more things from the synth civilization that seems to, bring this idea across.
Well, again, they don't follow their own continuity, Dave. That's my point. They do not follow their own continuity in this show. The technology that you see, PJ, I think you might. You've watched Stargate, right, PJ?
Oh, Stargate, yeah, totally.
Okay, so because I don't think Dave has watched Stargate, but there's a race in Stargate called the Replicators. Okay, yeah. And the Replicators are basically a machine race. And when Shoji was building that looked like a straight up ripoff from Stargate SG-1 of the Replicators. Looked exactly like the Replicators. Did you notice that, PJ, or do you notice it now that I said it?
What you mean the communication device?
Yeah, the array. When the array was like built like stacking up like the Replicators from Stargate SG-1. And the
You're
thing
right.
is, it just seems like they're ripping off everything. You know what I mean? I mean, also I'll point out in terms of ripping off everything, going to Ron Moore's version of Battlestar Galactica, when the Zot Vash, well, I guess we found out he's a Zot Vash washout. Soji's boyfriend is a Zot Vash washout because apparently he's a man, so he washed out of the Zot Vash. He says the story of why the Zot Vash are the way they are, and it's Battlestar Galactica. It literally is Battlestar Galactica. It's everything that happened before is going to happen again, because he was saying it was history. And basically, this is a cycle that constantly repeats itself, where humans or organic life builds synths. The synths destroy the organics, and then it all starts all over again. It's exactly what he said. It was a straight up ripoff of Battlestar Galactica. And Katie's in the house. She says hi. Says she's running a little late. But Katie, we're glad you're here, and we do look forward to your comments. So please feel free to comment on the show and your thoughts and all that. But
Do you guys recognize this image?
Yeah, it's from the opening title for Discovery, which I thought was kind of. I was kind of surprised to see that. I
thought it was from Picard.
No, that's opening titles from Discovery, and it's weird. I guess they intended to do this flower thing the whole time. I don't know. There's so many things. Hi, James. There's so many things from Picard and Discovery that still just don't make a lot of sense to me. I for example, well, you know what? We're going to do the writer's room here in a few minutes, and we'll worry about it then. All I'm going to say, like I said, it just I like seeing Riker.
I like the comment. I like the comment. Again, I blame Q for the continuity issue. So,
for me, I liked seeing Riker in the captain's chair. There were elements of the Data scene that I thought was kind of nice. Picard and Data saying goodbye. I didn't like the fact that I was having to watch Data die yet again.
What was the point of Data? Okay. Actually, I know the answer to this question as far as what the producer said, because I watched the writer's room, and it's the most unsatisfying answer I've ever heard. It's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. But I'm like, there's no reason for Data to die. If Data is plugged into this consciousness of this machine, Data can essentially live forever. He is a machine. And of course, what they decided was, this is what Akiva said, they decided that the most human thing is our mortality. It's our mortality that makes us human. That is the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life, that your mortality, the fact that you're going to die, is what makes you a human being. You know what? You know who else dies? Every single other frickin' living organism lives and dies. That is the stupidest thing I have ever heard, that what makes you human is the fact that you can die.
That means that with me either.
That means we're the same as bacteria, because bacteria can die.
All I'm going to say is this: what a horrible message for right now. That's it. What a horrible message for right now.
And that's what Akiva said on the Ready Room, was that the message was, and why Data had to die, was because that's what makes us human, our mortality. Every other effing organism on the planet, and probably other life on every other planet, if there is, they live and they die. It's a commonality. It is not what makes us uniquely human. They have lost the message completely. Gene's vision has completely been lost on these guys, that's their message. We all die. That's what makes us human.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate. You know, and all I'm going to say is just there were elements of that moment with Picard and Data, because I was hoping to see the two of them together again. And there were elements of that I kind of liked. But, you know, when Data asked Picard to basically take him off life support, essentially, all I could think of is like, why am I watching this? Why in the hell am I watching this?
And the other point is Data already died. Why do we have to see him die again?
Why do I have to see this again? Like, you know, you literally have the ability, because you're going to do more seasons of Picard. Why not, you know, put him in the synth body too?
But let me answer one thing about that. This whole thing about Brent Spiner being concerned about him not being able to play Data is bullshit, because all those synths now have a human body that he could be himself and still be Data. Like you need no makeup at all.
Yeah, I totally agree.
I brought that up as a scenario with bringing back Lore. Was that Brent Spiner could actually be one of the biosynths like Soji, not the Data synths, you know what I mean, for lack of a better term. And he could have just played it that way. We do have a comment here from the Rogues Gallery from Katie, and I've heard her talking about this online, and I feel really bad when I see this. But Katie says, "This episode broke me as a fan. I'm absolutely devastated and disgusted with what Jerry Ryan allowed Seven to become. She made her an animalistic, alcoholic, and irreverent character. I am heartbroken." And Katie, I feel your pain in spades. We haven't even touched on Seven. The remark when she's saying, "Why don't I just end it all? You know what I mean? I got no family." I mean, Katie is like the #1 Voyager fan. And I can't imagine how tough that is for her to see that, to basically discard Voyager completely, which is the show that gave us Seven in the first place, and to just discard all that and basically show us that Seven is a murderer, she's an alcoholic, she's hopeless, she's suicidal.
I agree, Katie.
I mean, it's sad, and I feel for you, Katie. I really do, because I mean, I can imagine if, like, my favorite Star Trek is the original series. If they did something like that to Kirk, you know what I mean, or did something like that to you know, any one of the original series characters, I would be heartbroken too. I'd be like, "What the hell is this?" You know, like
Eric,
Kirk,
wouldn't you say?
I have no one. You know,
Eric, wouldn't you say that Shatner's comment about him never playing Kirk again is a way of saying you're not fucking up my character?
I like that. I hope that's true. I hope that's true.
That's true.
I hope that's true.
Oh, I'm sorry for swearing, by the way.
No, it's a show intended for adults. We said at the beginning, so don't feel too bad about it. It's not the first, nor will it probably be the last time. So
well, Josh does say, how many times did we see Spock die? And that's not necessarily a bad point. We did see Spock die, you know what I mean? And they did bring him back. But that's also part of the point, too, is he came back, right? We were able to get Spock back even after they killed him. And of course, Wrath of Khan is my favorite Star Trek. That's my favorite Star Trek anything. The second Star Trek film, Star Trek II, Wrath of Khan. It's my favorite Trek. And Spock did die. He did die, but we brought him back. We brought him back in Search for Spock, which I think is a very highly underrated Trek film, in my opinion. It's also part of the only real Trek trilogy, which is, you know, Wrath of Khan, Search of Spock, and The Voyage Home. That's a trilogy. And it's, you know, I don't know, man. I don't know. Katie mentions she was attacked on Twitter and Instagram for not liking Did It In For Me. For them to make Seven pan, I did hear about this too, wasn't even around during Voyager, with Raffi is making Seven with a druggy alcoholic doing shots with Raffi. And yeah, that was really weird. I've heard this too, that the idea that Seven is pan, and the reason that her and Raffi are holding hands is because obviously they're going to have some sort of a love affair in the second season. It is really just shoehorned like you wouldn't believe. They literally have like 2 scenes together. There's no relationship between the two of them at all. There's not even a friendship between the two of them at all. And the next thing we know, we see them like kind of lovingly looking in each other's eyes, you know what I mean, holding hands, you know. And of course, what Katie's mentioning is Raffi is an addict, and they're like drinking together. That's a great message too. You know what I mean? Raffi's an addict, and Seven is drinking with her. I hate that. I cannot stand.
Yeah,
that.
I was it's we're already way into the I don't know. I was trying to talk about the few things I liked. So basically for me, that was about it. That's going to be the high point for me. There were elements of the data thing I kind of liked, but I really, really hated. There was elements of seeing Riker in command again that I liked because I hoped we were going to see that, but then I hated it. I thought it was unfortunate. They never at one point even tried to do a moment where Soji actually met Data, since she's sort of quote unquote Data's daughter. Like she never really met her dad, like sort of like there's just a lot of things in this show that does that. You could tell that they probably had a rough idea and they were just kind of cobbling together and making random changes on the fly because none of this really seems to work at the end of the day, at least for me personally. I'll just tell you right now, here's my total review of Picard season 1. I will not be back for season 2. That's it. That's my whole review. I don't want to watch any more of this. I don't want to have anything else to do with it. It's okay as a show if you're curious about it. You know, right now you can see it on CBS All Access for free. If you're curious to watch a show, watch it. Your opinion might be very different from mine. You might like it. But overall, there were so many things they did in this show that I did not like. I didn't like what they did with Seven. I didn't like what they did with Data, ultimately. I didn't like how they portrayed Picard. And here's the really creepy thing. Here's the really creepy thing that came to me after the fact. Because of what happened with the USS Calvin in the J.J. Abrams film, and they talked about how the timelines and everything had changed, right? This is a divergent timeline. This is not the same timeline that we really remember. So this is the future from that moment on. So what this tells me, based off of Picard, is this Captain Picard is not the same Captain Picard that we watched The Next Generation. This is not the same 7 of 9. So I don't know what in the world happened to these characters, but it's almost like all the previous episodes never really happened. None of our memories of any of these events are true anymore, based off of how they portrayed the characters in the show. It's almost like they tried to make the totality of Trek in a weird way a little bit less relevant. If you try to connect the dots.
I have a question for you, Dave, and for both of you. When the hell did Picard become so arrogant as they put him out to be? He was such a thoughtful captain. Are you freaking kidding me? He had to listen to Commander Troy to Troy all the time about her BS stuff, and I mean, I don't know. Is it me or where was he arrogant?
Yeah, I don't remember Picard being arrogant in Next Gen. He was, you know, for the longest time in my mind, he was probably. I love Kirk. Okay, I'm a Kirk guy. I've got a Kirk action figure staring at me right here. As a matter of fact, I'm a huge Kirk fan, and Kirk is my captain. And this show definitely cemented the fact that Kirk is my captain. That's for darn sure. But I think he became this arrogant version of Picard at the first episode of this season.
You're saying in Picard he's arrogant.
Eric.
You're saying in Picard he's arrogant.
They keep calling him.
They keep saying he is.
Show. Yeah, they keep calling him that. They keep talking about
his hubris and his arrogance.
Yeah, they keep bringing
I just want to understand.
The admiral gives him grief for being arrogant. The F-bomb admiral. That's her new name.
Okay.
I mean, she calls him arrogant. Raffi calls him arrogant. Like everybody calls him arrogant.
Yeah, I don't see him as arrogant. I see him. I mean, he's kind of incompetent in Picard, to be honest. They make him into
but in TNG, Eric, was he arrogant in TNG?
No, no, he never was. That's the thing.
He was confident and he was competent. He's not either one of those things in Picard. There's a difference. There's a huge difference. You know what I mean? Arrogant is not a way to describe him at all. That's just stupid. You know I don't even know what to do with that. We're getting backed up in the chats a little bit, and I do want to give our audience a chance to vet, because that's what's going on here. So Katie says, I'm shocked at TrekCore to mock a fan and say regarding Chakotay. Hello, strangers. You are meeting me for the first time. And by the way, I dated a guy with the face tattoo 20 years ago whom you never met. I know this post Katie's talking about. What a fan did was they posted to TrekCore and said, one of the things I really hated was that couldn't they at least have just had a throwaway line about Chakotay? Something to at least tell us to acknowledge Chakotay. And that's all they said. Like, they didn't give a suggestion what that should be. Just, I wish there'd have been some mention. And that was the response. That was like, they mocked the person and said, oh, yeah, so hello, strangers, you're meeting me, as if she would say that. That's not what this fan suggested. The fan just suggested something that would have been nice, just so we had an acknowledgement of Chakotay and the relationship that Seven had with him. Katie goes on to say, I hope one day they know that I broke down in tears because of what they did to Seven. This is how upset some of the fans are. To see her depressed, killing anyone who hurts her, and drink her woes when I have alcoholism in my family is heartbreaking. And I am with you, Katie, because I know a lot about addiction. Okay, I know a lot about this stuff, and that's why I was so hard on Raffi with the relapse situation and mocking relapse. And she is like this, just such a damaged person. Seven is such a damaged and such a depressed person. And Jazz says it's the mirror universe. It is. It's the mirror universe. This is like Mirror 7. This is Mirror 7. This is Mirror Picard. This is actually, you know what, Dave, you'll appreciate this. This is Bizarro Picard. This is Bizarro World. This is Bizarro Picard. It's not even, don't even give it the dignity of being Trek Mirror Universe. This is Bizarro World, like the cube-shaped planet of Bizarro World, you know? Yeah, it's crazy. Got a couple other comments here. Oh, Man of Sand is back. What does Man of Sand have to say? It says, hello. Well, it's nice to see Riker come to Picard's rescue, which we all agreed on. He leaves a happy Picard who instantly collapses after into a death swoon, only to die. I hated that too, by the way. Only to die among his newfound cast of friends. No love for TNG fans. I did catch that, Man of Sand, and I hated that. But Riker leaves him. He dies, and he dies with a bunch of strangers, essentially, at least for us. I mean, they're strangers to us. I don't care what anybody else says. They're nobody to us fans.
Even if he didn't die, what the hell is the point of just warping in and warping out? What they wouldn't leave two ships there?
Shoehorned in, PJ, because it was shoehorned into the story. It doesn't fit with anything else. They shoehorned it in for pure fan service because they knew we would like it, which I did. I said, Jonathan Frakes still got it. I wouldn't mind seeing Jonathan Frakes running around on the Titan. There was always this proposal for a Titan show that I thought was a great idea. And now when I see that, I was like, I think Frakes could have done it. That's the show I want to see. You know what I mean? But it doesn't fit with Picard. It doesn't fit in Picard at all. And Man of Sand goes on to say, Picard now seems to be reborn as a robot duplicate of original Picard, conveniently of the same age. Is he really the same person after this? What was the purpose of this last moment transformation? What was the purpose, guys? What the hell was the purpose of putting him in an old man's body?
Let me wax poetic about something here for just a moment. Okay. Many years ago, I was working on this treatment for this comic book series I wanted to do, and it was called Atlas. And the basic premise of it is that an American astronaut disappears, and then many years later, this robot being shows up, and he's been put there by this alien civilization to study the planet, kind of like Day the Earth Stood Still style, you know, in order to determine if whether or not we should be allowed to continue to exist, because we may be a danger, you know, to the universe as a whole because of our predilection towards war, such on and so forth. Okay. The twist of the story, because I'm never going to do it at this point anyway, the twist of the story basically was that he actually fights against the alien civilization. He's tearing through the ship, and then he basically finds himself a prisoner on the ship, even though this robot eventually believes that he is him. So it's kind of the Swamp Thing idea. So the idea is human consciousness in an android body, because there's these really interesting research papers that have been written that talks about how we as a society and civilization must continue to move forward as we integrate more and more technology, that we're going to become more like cyborgs. And there's also some theoretical papers out there about the idea of taking the consciousness and memories of a person, putting them into a robot body, and could you technically, quote unquote, live forever? So it's a very interesting real world science concept that they can explore in a science fiction form. But at the end of this episode, they said, oh, well, you're just the same. You don't have any special abilities. You're not going to live forever. It's just like, so you're not even going to explore this idea that's a very real, interesting science concept that you could have explored with Patrick Stewart, who's such a great actor. Like you could explore that concept.
It's a huge philosophical concept as well. It's a huge philosophical debate as well. And even a religious and spiritual debate as well. And there's none of that is in this. In fact, there's actually a throwaway line that I found offensive. There's a throwaway line when Raffi and Rios are fixing the ship, where they basically talk about him not having a soul. And I thought that was in there for a reason. I understand what they're doing. I understand the method of their madness. Okay, they're trying to say there is no soul. There's no such thing as a soul. Therefore, all you are is the sum of your memories. And I find that offensive. Okay, because that's not something. There are lots of people that would disagree with you. You know,
you're absolutely right, Eric. Absolutely right with what you just said.
It's a throwaway line, but it's there. She says you don't have a soul, and that, because like you said, Dave, this is a topic that could be treated with a lot of deep thought and reflection, because it gets to the core of, you know, what are we, who are we, all that kind of stuff. And it's just kind of all tossed aside, and it's very like cartoony. You know what I mean? Like it's not treated in any kind of a serious way.
I wouldn't even say it's, in my mind, it's not even cartoony. It's just a waste, because it's a very real, interesting thing that could be explored. And it's something that I think as we continue to move forward, it's something that we need to begin to ask ourselves. And it shows a real, unfortunately, lack of imagination, that they're not even willing to explore these ideas in the next season of Picard. Because all I could think of is at the end, they show us they're all together on a crew on board this ship. And I'm like, why the hell are they working together? Rios was hired to, run them out there. They didn't really get along very well. Why is Seven still there? Isn't she part of the Fenris Rangers? Even though so far we've only seen one. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me why they gelled as a crew. Agnes is a murderer. Like, what are you trying to say? At the end of the day, that was the thing. When they showed us the shot of them all coming together, I'm like going, what is their mission? They've accomplished their mission. No one can still tell me what in the hell Soji's mission was, but they've accomplished whatever the heck it is they're trying. Why are they still together? They're not Starfleet, so it's not like they're serving on board a ship, so it makes sense that they would go to their next mission. This is a bunch of random individuals that were thrown together for one basic purpose, and it's over. Shouldn't they just go back to Earth and go their separate ways? Is that season 2? They just go back
for them to stick together. Like again,
I don't get it.
Puzzle pieces don't fit. Okay, what they said originally was that this is going to be basically a 30-hour movie. If you look at it that way, yes, this is the first act of a movie. That's what the season was, because that you basically got the crew together, right? So now we can go on to the next part and the adventures, right? But it doesn't fit the story that they told us. It doesn't fit, because it's all these jumbled pieces again. It's the puzzle pieces that are jammed together and they don't fit correctly. Joss says he does mention that Uhura was once tempted with eternal youth with an android body. I do remember that.
Yeah,
I do, and that's another thing, is that goes back to what Dave was talking about with TOS. TOS had several android-like themed episodes where they talked about androids and artificial life, and it would have been very easy to tie these things into Picard. But again, Kurtzman says it's impossible. You just can't do it. Just impossible. It's just not possible. And then Katie says, I'm religious and found that Soul comment foul. Also, the euthanasia message was disgusting. This series with nothing but pro-euthanasia message, which Stewart is for. Picard pulling the plug on Data. That is a good insight, Katie. That really is. That is a good insight because that's what it was. It was like a euthanasia kind of thing with Data, and it's totally unnecessary. It doesn't make any sense because Data's an android. And an android, we assume, could live for, millennia. And I want to mention this, too, in terms of how bad these guys are and how they are not Trek fans. There was an episode where Data contemplated his own death. I can't remember the episode, but I remember there was an episode where Data talked about the fact that he knew he was mortal and eventually his parts would stop working and he would die. He knew that already. He said that. That's not what makes you human. I'm sorry. That is just stupid. I'll say it again. That is the stupidest message I've ever heard because every living organism eventually dies. So again, what they're trying to say is you are no different than bacteria. That's the message of this show is you as a human being, your life is no more valuable than bacteria because the defining thing of humanity is the fact that we die. I hate that message. That is not Trek. That is not Roddenberry. That is disgusting. Okay. And I'm with you, Dave. I do not want to watch the second season of this. I do not want to watch the second season of this. I don't want to spend my money for sure.
Yeah. And for those of you, just real quick, and I know PJ saw this, and I know Eric saw it as well. With everything that's going on after finishing this, I wanted to watch something fun and science fiction, and I found myself where I didn't want to watch anything Star Trek. So I was like, okay, I want to watch something fun. I want to get lost in just some adventure. So the first thing I turned on was the Orville. That's the first thing I turned on, and I started working my way through the first season. I friggin' love this show. It is the most Star Trek show that's being made right now that's not a fan production. And I can't recommend for those of us that were unhappy with Picard. I think the Orville is that's going to be the place for us to go because I feel like Seth MacFarlane, the staff, they understand what Star Trek is, and they have very real world relevant things to discuss on the show. I think they did a better job of examining the concept of AI on the Orville than what they even tried to attempt to do. Like they didn't even attempt to do it on Picard. It's just a throwaway subplot. And then on the Orville, they actually got knee deep into it. And it was very interesting.
I have a point to make here for the writer's room. And I think this is a good segue into the writer's room. I just want to acknowledge one more comment from Manasan. He says, I feel like the writers and showrunners were in a position of privilege to work with the characters and story universe we love, and yet they squandered their privilege by just hacking around and winging it. And that's exactly how I feel. This was a hack job, and they were winging it. The story is a mess. It is like a bunch of stories piled up on top of each other, going in all these different directions. It's like just this psychotic mess. And I agree with you, Manasan. It's a privilege.
Absolutely.
Trek. To accentuate the thing with Orville, Seth MacFarlane begged to work on Trek, and they told him to go pound sand, so he made the Orville. Right, PJ? That's the story, right? That's what happened.
Yep.
He respectfully asked, I have a pitch for a Star Trek show. They told him to go screw himself. So he made the Orville. Good for him, right? Good for him. That's what the rest of us should do, right? Let's make our own shit.
That's right.
That's what, right?
And that's what I have too. I have red skirts. It's my love letter to what Star Trek was. I don't think it really exists anymore, unfortunately. But I still have my memories of Trek. I still have the original series. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to find it hard to watch Next Gen now. I feel like this really did damage my perspective and opinion of Picard. And I've
heard that from other fans. I keep hearing that from other fans, and it really disappoints me because I want to point this out. No one, in terms of the producers or the writers, none of the producers or writers from classic Trek all the way to Enterprise, and I'll even include Enterprise. I have issues with Enterprise. None of those people were involved with Star Trek Picard. Not a single one of them. Nobody. Zero. Zilch. They're castmates, but no producers or writers were invited back. And that's very telling, and that shows you how they don't care about Trek. They just want to use the name for their own agenda. Katie says, I'm not watching a series that will degrade Roddenberry. I am a proud traditional Star Trek fan. Goodbye, Picard. Goodbye, Mirror Trampy 7. I will not have trash thrown in my face. I am worth more. And you are. We all are worth more. We're all worth more. I agree with you completely. And about the Orville, Josh said that the social media plot was awesome on Orville. And I don't know if I saw that one. Did you see the social media episode for Orville?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did. It's season 1. I actually rewatched it the other day. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's very interesting. It's very topical, and that's the thing that's interesting about the Orville. It still handles a lot of the same topics that people are championing, Discovery and Picard for, but it handles it, in my mind, in a much more classic Trek sort of manner. And it has a very hopeful idea of the future, at least as far as we as beings from Earth have to look forward to. And that's what I want to do. I want to feel like that there's something hopeful for us. Right now, in my humble opinion, we need a hopeful message. We need to escapism, and we need to believe that maybe here in a few years, not a few years, but a couple hundred years, whatever, that we're off traveling through space, having adventures, meeting alien civilizations, and we're bettering ourselves by learning from these other cultures. I mean, I love that idea. And the Orville it basically explores that in a classic Trek nuanced way. But at the same point, they have their own perspective. They have their own spin. It's highly, highly entertaining. The score, the music, the design, it's such a well put together show. And I just found myself, when I got done with all this, I wanted to watch something that was Trek, but I just found myself wanting to walk away from all of this for a little while, and I found myself just turning the Orville on, and it, to me, it's like this. The Orville is a current modern produced Star Trek show in my mind. That's what it is. But at the same point, they're able to do things that and that's the thing. I was just happy I had that to escape into. And I agree, Katie. Katie just posted a comment. She said, we need Pike, we need number 1, and we need Spock. I agree, Katie. I really, really am hoping that that is what is going to happen. That we will, that the producers that are currently working in control of Trek, that they will listen to the fans. I'm a little leery about that too, but I'm very, very much hoping they'll listen to the fans. And that hopefully the Pike show can be a classic Trek show. They've run as far away from classic Trek as they can get at this point. Between Discovery and Picard, they're way off the map. So it'd be nice to have, even if it's only for one season, a modern, new produced Trek show that actually falls in line with Roddenberry's original vision. And I think the Pike show could definitely be that. That's what I'm hoping for. Whether they choose to do it or not, I don't know. Because it seems like either contractually or for whatever reason, they seem to be hesitant to move in that manner, even though there's tons of rumors that they're actually going to do something. I do desperately hope that they do that, because I believe that is because it'd be nice to have a show that's for those of us that are classic Trek fans, and then those people who want the newer stuff. Here's Picard, here's Discovery. I did like Discovery season 2. I've said that before. I think, and I do still believe Discovery season 2 is a much better Star Trek show for me personally than what Picard was. That's my personal opinion. Katie also has another comment here. She says, I cannot watch Star Trek right now and probably won't for a while. Picard makes me sick and 7 makes me cringe, even in the original form. The actors allowed their characters to be gutted. And I'd have to say, I think you're right, unfortunately, Katie. What they've done with these characters has damaged them in my mind as well. I was thinking, when I finished Picard, I was thinking, well, let me watch some classic Next Gen episodes and just get this out of my head, because I did not like Picard. But as I tried to watch a couple episodes, I found that I just didn't want to anymore. I was like, you know what? I don't want to. And then I have some friends who have always told me they're just diehard original series fans and they don't care for a lot of the other stuff. But I did enjoy Next Gen. I did enjoy, Voyager's not my favorite, but I did enjoy Voyager. There's quite a few episodes I quite love, actually. And all the stuff they did with the Borg and Voyager was great. There's all this wonderful, like I've told Eric before, there's several episodes of Enterprise that I really, really enjoy. But I found myself going, I don't want to watch this. So maybe over time, this will fade out of my mind and I'll be able to go back and rewatch Next Gen episodes and get back into it. But at the current moment, unfortunately, Katie, I feel like you too. I feel like that it has damaged these characters, and I don't necessarily want to see them right now. I need a little bit of distance from them. Katie also has another comment, and she says, they don't want a strong male lead on TV because all the feminists find it offensive. Disco season 2 was a heck of a lot better than Picard. Well, again, I think, Katie, we are in agreement, because I really like the second season of Discovery, and I really pulling for Pike. There's also some other good episodes, like the one that focused on Saru called, I think it's The Sound of Thunder. That is a really great episode. There's a lot of really fun, interesting things that they did in the second season of Discovery that I did enjoy. I'm a little leery about what they're going to do with season 3, just because I did not care for what they did with Picard. So let's hope that Disco season 3, carries some elements from season 2 forward, and it's at least fun. But I'm going to be honest with you, I'm kind of on the fence. So I hope that season 3 can win me over. Eric and I have discussed the possibility of actually watching and talking about Lower Decks. Hopefully Lower Decks will also be fun, the animated show. But I guess we'll have to wait and see. And then we also have another comment here. This is James. He says, I grew up on the original, but like TNG and Deep Space, of course, Deep Space Nine. Yes. I loved Deep Space Nine. Sisko is such a wonderful captain. Even though initially he was the commander of the space station, he was a great captain. Deep Space Nine was great. TNG was great. I personally, I love original series. Original series, I think, at the end of the day, is going to continue to be my jam. I kept thinking about how this movie did the whole AI idea better. This is Admiral Kirk from Motion Picture. That whole bit actually in there where there's around the Voyager probe, which they called V'ger, and they're talking about what it needs to evolve, which is a fun idea. Instead of talking about death, talking about evolving into a higher form, higher forms of consciousness, and just this idea like that. That's a much more interesting idea to talk about. The idea that we, through technology, maybe we can become better. Maybe we can find a way to treat each other better. Trek had a really powerful, resonating message. That's why it's lasted so long. And at the end of the day, I don't understand. Like, the message from Picard is sort of like, okay, whatever, moving on. That's how I feel about it. I don't care for that message.
The message of Picard, they said it very clearly, is that you are human because you can die. That was the message of Picard. So yeah. PJ's back. We had some technical difficulties, as you may have noticed. PJ,
I'm sorry, guys. StreamYards would not let me join again for like 5 minutes. I apologize. Okay.
But we're good now, right, PJ? We're good?
Huh? I'm good. Yeah, I'm good
now, though, right, PJ? Okay. So let's get into the writer's room. Let's try to fix this thing, okay? Because that was one of the big things that we wanted to do here with our special guest here, with PJ here in the room, okay? So we're going to go into the writer's room. Now, the way we're going to do this is I'm going to play the studio at first, set up a few parameters, and PJ is going to be our showrunner. and we do want the Rogues Gallery to participate. Now, PJ, as showrunner, you have full creative control, meaning that as anybody, whether it's me or whether it's Dave, whether it's someone from the Rogues Gallery that's pitching you something, you can yay or nay it, or you can put a little spin on it. You're the showrunner, so you're the ultimate arbitrator. But here's some of the little rules that the studio's giving you. Okay, obviously, we are. By the way, Josh said that you had a transporter malfunction. I like that. I like
That's
that.
funny, Josh.
Oh, I do want to acknowledge Katie's comment too. It says, with in regards to Disco, I doubt it was season 3. It's dystopian. They'll try and make Picard canon. There's a rumor that Picard references will be made. Thank God, Gates McFadden, Kate Mulgrew, and others didn't come back. And I kind of agree with you. I've seen that a lot where people are like, "Oh, I wish so and so would be in this," and I'm like, "No, you don't. No, you don't. You don't." But in our version, okay, here's the thing. Now I'm taking something key from Sir Patrick Stewart himself, because I think they failed about this. Okay, so I'm going to actually try to beat Picard at his own game with this little scenario here. Sir Patrick Stewart said on the Ready Room that one of the big reasons he wanted to do this was he was trying to make a statement about Brexit. And basically, Sir Patrick Stewart said that he feels that Brexit is a huge mistake and that it is only going to benefit the wealthiest people in his country, and it's going to have a detrimental effect on the poor. And you may already see what scenario I'm kind of giving you that's very obvious. I think Picard completely failed on all marks to give that message. If that's his message, which, by the way, I'm not saying whether it's a good message or not, but as the studio, this is the only way we get Sir Patrick Stewart. Sir Patrick Stewart wants to do a show in Star Trek. He wants it to be different. He doesn't want all the cast members back. We'll use the cast members that were actually in it. He said that Frakes can come back. He said that Spiner can come back. He said that Marina Sirtis could come back. But he doesn't want the other cast members. These are the only ones he wants. We have reached out to Jerry Ryan. She says she'll do it. We can put Hugh in it. Jonathan Del Arco says he'll do it. So we can use those same people if you want. We can talk about others, yay or nay, if we want to put somebody else. But we can't use any more of the TNG cast. And Sir Patrick Stewart wants to make a statement about Brexit. He thinks it's a bad idea. Now, I have an immediate idea that comes to mind about how we can start this story. And I think it's really simple. Okay? So I'm gonna do the first pitch. And Sir Patrick Stewart wants, first of all, I think Star Trek Picard failed miserably in giving that message. Why don't we do a story about a Federation colony or a Federation planet trying to break away from the Federation? How about that? Because we want to do a Brexit story. What do you guys?
You hit it on the money. What do you think, Dave?
Well, you could definitely do that. We could definitely do that as a story. We have to determine what it is about this particular society, the reason they want to break away. That either they feel like the Federation is, taking too much from them and leaving them with too little. We need an underpinning.
The synths discrimination, we could still use that angle. We could have a planet of synths. We don't have to divert that exactly from what they ended up doing anyway. This is kind of my point. So we could still have a planet of synths. Remember, we get Brent Spiner. So we have to get Brent Spiner in this show. So, we could bring him back as Data. We could bring him back as Lore. We could do what they did and bring him back as another Sung, which I think is stupid. But we have options. So if we want to make it, let's just say, let's go with Lore, the creator of the synth world, or he's the one that the synth world is based on. Okay, it has basically become part of the. Actually, no, I'll go a step back with Hugh's planet. okay? Because we know Hugh had a planet full of XBs, okay, that were separated from the collective and had an attachment to lore. We never found out what happened with that planet. But in Picard, Hugh says he's a Federation citizen. So we can assume that planet joined the Federation. So let's start there. Let's start with Hugh's planet, okay? And we're going to make that it did become part of the Federation, but there's some sort of discrimination going on with these XBs. How about that? I think that's a good place to start from. That can be our world that wants to break away, because again, this is going to be an analogy of Brexit. What do you think?
Katie says, Eric, Katie says that, yes, I also am not political, but the anti-Brexit, anti-Trump is getting old. We see it on too many shows.
No, I agree. I'm trying to beat them at their own game. You know what I mean? And I'm just trying to make a simple story because this is what Sir Patrick Stewart said. He said that he was upset about Brexit. It seems to me that's a real obvious, easy story. And the thing is, I see the Federation as a good thing, right? Trekkies see the Federation as a good thing. If you want to leave the Federation, that would probably be bad. It's not that hard. It's not that hard because the Federation is a good entity, unlike in Star Trek Picard where it's trash, okay? So what I'm trying to say is the Federation is good. We have Hugh's planet, okay, that basically have become part of the Federation, and they're experiencing discrimination. You know what I mean? They're experiencing problems because they're ex-Borg. And who better to champion them than Jean-Luc Picard? Because he is himself an XB. What I'm saying is that's an easy way to tie it in what they said.
I think also too there could be an interesting angle if you want to complicate the political situation and still do some of the same things that was in the show. For example, what if we have, of course, Hugh's world with the XBs, the repatriated, what do you want to call them, reclaimed Borg, right? And they're still working to reclaim more, obviously, and bring them into this society. What if they agree to take in, because they are part of the Federation, this group of synths who are basically trying to find asylum or amnesty, whatever, from this Romulan group that's been using them essentially as slave labor as well. Maybe that's what also puts this planet in the crosshairs. So that's a way to kind of complicate it,
like that,
politically a little bit, and maybe that's the trigger that sets everything off. You have this group of the synth beings. They're trying to find somewhere. They're trying to get away from the Romulans. Hugh says, come here. You're welcome here. We are part of the Federation. And then the Federation, they don't have to necessarily be the bad guys, but at the same point, too, politically, they find themselves in a weird position. It's like, well, wait a minute. I thought you guys wanted to kind of secede from the Federation. Now we're going to have to come in here and protect you guys. You just brought these synths in because they need help. There's an angle here I really like, which is the idea that, assuming Hugh's planet is a stable member of the Federation, they give refuge to these synths that are being exploited by the Romulans. Okay, they give refuge to them, and that puts them into some conflict with the rest of the Federation because maybe the rest of the Federation didn't want to do it. Maybe there's some suspicion of the synths, that kind of thing. There is a pitch from the gallery here that also we could borrow the American Revolution, that they break away to a lack of what they feel is proper representation. And that's another angle. And PJ, again, you're the showrunner, so you kind of have to decide which way we want to go with this.
Let me just let's read Joss Posey's comment for a sec. Borrow from the American Revolution that they break away due to the lack of what they feel is proper representation.
Right. And that's good. That's an angle that could be played. And then Katie's got one too. She's talking about Star Trek Picard. What does it say here? It's spit venom in the face of the Federation, Archer, Pike, Kirk, old Picard, Cisco, and my beloved and principal. Yes, that's true. That's true. And then Mana Sound's got a comment here. He says, should we look at core founding people of the Federation trying to separate, like the Vulcans or Andorians? Someone important enough to call into question the Federation's ability to survive. Well, I think if we're going to explore that angle, which I think is interesting, what do you think, PJ?
Should we look at the core founding people trying to like that? Yeah, listen, one of the big problems I had, guys, was that the Vulcans, when they kept saying how the Federation and Picard abandoned the Romulans. The Vulcans, being cousins of the Romulans, would never, and being one of the 4 founding races of the Federation, would never just abandon the Romulans. It doesn't make any sense.
Could that be the reason that Vulcan's trying to separate? Going with Man of Sands pitch here is like, could that be the reason that the Vulcans want to separate? Is because they supported, obviously they supported based on the Kelvin films with Spock. Spock did help the Romulans, you know what I mean? And obviously Spock started a movement, like a revolution on Romulus, where there were all these people that were trying to adopt the Vulcan philosophy. Is that a possibility? Is that something that could have caused the conflict?
I think though too that the humans, like the Vulcans, wouldn't do it, and then the humans have a special relationship with the Vulcans because of first contact. It seems to me like you know, I don't know. I do like this idea that Dave was talking about the Borg taking in the synths. I did think that has very interesting Star Trek overtones.
Well, what if we take this idea that Man of Sands pitched? What if we take the concept of a current Federation member, not necessarily a founding Federation member, and they've decided that they want to split from the Federation because they don't feel like they get proper representation? I think the obvious candidate for that would be the Klingons. You know, they're sort of a later member to the Federation. They don't have quite the same ties, obviously, that the Vulcans or the Andorians would have to the Federation. What if it's actually the Klingons? And it makes sense. You could see the Klingons deciding one day, it's like, we've had it with this. We're going to separate. And then we could even take this idea of Hugh, the XBs, and the synths, and we could still play with this concept. And Hugh's planet, still, they want to break away, the Brexit idea. We have the synths who show up who need amnesty, right? And then, you know, when Hugh, you know, they come there and the Romulans show up, right? And the Romulans are trying to kill these synths. You know, they're basically runaway slaves. And they're concerned one amongst them could, you know, they fear that one amongst them could be, quote unquote, this destroyer that they're talking about. Okay. And maybe there's a lot more sense to what we've seen. Maybe it's kind of an Alien Nation scenario, right? It's a huge ship, bunch of these synths. They've basically been used as slaves, right? They show up, the Romulans show up. They're like, okay, look, one of them in there, this synth is a problem. He's the reason they broke away. You guys don't understand that we have to find this one synth because it cannot be allowed because it's caused all kinds of problems. And then the Klingons are like, well, wait a minute. They're part of the Klingon Empire now. And why are you Romulans here? Then we get to reignite the conflict between the Romulans and the Klingons again. We get to revisit that concept, which I think might be fun. And then Picard basically comes in, and part of his mission is he's representing the Federation. Maybe he is still an admiral, and he's still in Starfleet. And the show is all about how do we navigate what's happening between all these different groups that are clashing. And then, Eric, if you don't mind, I have one more idea. What if it turns out that
we do have some other ideas here, and okay. You're kind of going, and you're not. We need to get to some of the other ideas because we're getting past them. We're getting too far into it. So the ideas have to come to kind of like Fast and Furious. You know what I mean? And we kind of have, PJ, you kind of have to give us a little bit of a yes or no as far as whether you want to go that direction or not. But like Katie mentions, she wants 7. So she says, I think that 7 could have worked at the Federation installing astrometric labs and starships, and Picard called her to help the XBs. I like that idea. I think that's a great idea. It makes sense if we're going to go with the XBs having some sort of problem or Hugh's planet having some sort of problem. Again, it would make sense that Picard would be kind of the person they look to, he himself being a former Borg, And then, of course, Seven being a former Borg. The two of them team up like that. But when we find Seven, she's at the Utopia Planitia shipyards, and she's basically installing astrometric labs in various starships. I personally like that idea as far as bringing Seven into it and where she's at in the continuity of this. What do you think, PJ? Yay or nay on that's how we get Seven into the show?
Eric, to be honest, I'm sorry I didn't hear what you were saying because I was writing you a message. I think that because of the time difference, I'm not going to make it much longer, guys.
Okay.
We get it, PJ, because I know that there's a huge. People should understand this. If you don't, PJ's in Madrid, so there's a huge time difference between us, and we appreciate you being here, PJ. And kind of playing with us as far as doing the show and all that stuff.
I really wish I was a little more coherent because it's almost morning here. So,
yeah, I understand that 9-hour time difference. We know that. So yeah,
I'll be here for I'm going to leave in like 5 minutes. If that's okay?
That's okay. But what do you think about Katie's idea? Katie's idea is we want to bring Seven into this. Seven is basically installing astrometrics labs on starships. And Picard has called her to help with the plight of the XBs. That's how we get Seven in this show, and that's what Seven's doing. What do you think?
I think that's a way to go. I would think that possibly in the last 20 years, Seven has probably moved on to other stuff that she might be working on. To more elaborate things. I would assume that the Federation would have her being like a Borg expert.
So like the Borg subject matter expert kind of.
Yeah. I mean, why isn't she like a captain level Borg expert, much like that
like
lady
Shelby,
was.
Like Shelby was the Borg expert.
Shelby, exactly, Eric.
Borg expert. I like that a lot. So instead, like Shelby used to be the Borg expert in Best of Both Worlds. Now Seven is in that role where she is, you're saying like a captain. She's a Starfleet captain, but she is the Borg subject matter expert, essentially, for Starfleet. She helps design the anti-Borg weapons and all that kind of stuff. And she's the one that is the go-to person on the Borg.
And there's a huge problem, guys. The fact that it seems we can infer that the Borg are still some kind of a threat, but it's not addressed in the whole 10 episodes. What's up with the Borg?
Right.
We don't know.
No, we never know. We never find out what's up with the rest of the Borg. That's never addressed in the show. It is addressed in the writer's room where the producers say the Borg are still out there. This is just one broken cube, but that's never addressed in the show. Now, Manasan got into the Klingon thing, Dave, and said, are the Klingons members of the Federation? Or do they just have a treaty with the Federation? And I kind of was thinking that when you were saying that as well, is like, well, I don't really think of the Klingons as a member of the Federation. I think of them as allied with the Federation, kind of more of I guess of a analogy to NATO. You know what I mean? Like what the EU is to the United States, that kind of a thing. That's kind of their relationship. Joss also puts this out. He says, what if there is a disease affecting the synths introduced by the Romulans, which is a really interesting idea. I actually kind of like that idea. So, because that is even more topical, really, you know what I mean, as far as what we're dealing with right now. So I think there's a lot of good ideas here. And then Katie goes on to say, maybe her and Chakotay are with the Federation. She is an ambassador to the Borg, basically, which puts in the idea of the Federation actually has established some sort of a relationship with the Borg at this point, and then Seven would be in an ambassador role. What do you think of that, PJ?
I think that's Katie. That's an interesting idea. Yeah, if somehow they've evolved to a point where they can actually have some kind of intermittent negotiations with the Borg, that'd be interesting.
What do you think of this idea of a synth element that actually is like sick, that actually has some sort of, that might be too topical in my opinion. What do you think, PJ?
I mean, maybe it's possible. I had a real big problem. I'm not saying it's not possible, but I personally had a big problem with this whole cloning data from one positron. I don't know.
From the one neuron or whatever it was. Yeah, that didn't make any sense to me either, and it doesn't make sense to, I think, any engineer or doctor for that matter.
If it was like that, I don't know. I mean, listen, Soong, Data's creator, was very big on making things very human-like in Data, but I don't know, down to the point of designing artificial DNA. I don't know.
That's not something I would go with personally. I don't think that's not an element that I would go with. As far as like, I like the idea more of maybe using lore than Data, quite frankly, because Data did die in Nemesis and all that kind of stuff. But
listen, they had such an opportunity to make the synths be like a result, like the whole thing be part of like lore's elaborate plan. And I don't know, just anyway. Eric, I'm gonna have to go, guys. I really appreciate it. I love this idea, this writer's room idea. Please invite me back at an earlier time, guys. I'd be awesome it's awesome.
No, we appreciate you coming on, PJ, and we totally understand the issue of the time difference. We're at an hour and 30 minutes right now into the show, and we didn't really expect to keep you that long, but we did have technical difficulty as well.
Well, I love the idea, guys. Thank you so much. Thanks to everybody in the chat, and I'm gonna listen offline. Okay, guys.
All right. Thank you, PJ.
Thank you, PJ.
Okay, guys. Thanks.
Now we do still have some other ideas here, so let's go back to you, Dave, as showrunner, since PJ had to step out. So apparently you've been put into the role of showrunner once again, as happens on shows in real life. So we have, let's see here. Katie says, in Star Trek Picard, they victimized the Borg to make you feel sorry for them and not show what they were. Enemies who destroyed individuality and humanity, and that's something we could try to go that way, or we could try to go a different way with that. Joss, I think, was talking about the whole thing with the data cloning, and he said, would there be information degradation? I would think there would be. I actually don't buy the whole idea that you would have his memories and things like that. That just doesn't make any sense to me. I think it's kind of like gobbledygook, and not really like based on any kind of even like a pseudoscience. Katie says Star Trek used to have science and military consultants in the writer's room. We need that. But Siobhan hates military protocol. Shall I say JL? And by the way, I'm pretty good with that stuff, Katie. I was actually in the Navy Reserve. So like, remember I point out things like, Jonathan, Riker being in charge of a fleet when he's a captain. I'm happy to bring up points like that and be like, no, that wouldn't happen. That's stupid. Okay. We have to at least make him an admiral in our version, because otherwise, if you want to put him in charge of a fleet as a captain, it doesn't make sense. Especially the entire Federation fleet. That makes absolutely no sense. Absolutely no sense.
Well, and see, another interesting concept that could be used for this is, we talked about setting up this Brexit type scenario. The idea that the Borg are still a threat. We have the XB planet and Hughes on there, and the sense, the whole thing. But one of the things that could be interesting is that Picard actually, maybe he is technically quote unquote retired. Maybe his doctor has informed him that he does have that condition, right? And that his time is limited. And maybe Riker is the one who calls him up and says, I know that you're aware of some of the situation that's going on the XB planet. Well, it's gotten a little bit more complicated. We need someone to go out there and handle this, and you would be the best person to do this. And that might explain, why Picard is kind of called up and asked on behalf of the Federation because of his experiences, and he gets to assemble his crack team that he goes out on basically this essentially diplomatic de-escalation mission.
Wait. We're going to have a crack team? We're not going to have a motley crew?
No.
We're not going to have a bunch of misfits and a bunch of drug addicts?
No, because it explains, because, Seven would be, again, she would be the Federation's, Borg expert. You know what I mean? She could have already been in touch with Hugh and could understand. She could be the one who actually knows the situation on the ground, because she's been the Federation, officer that's been supervising what's going on. And, Picard's come out there and he's kind of like, he's there to help get her back. You know what I mean? And they're, and he's going to be kind of trying to figure out what's happening. I mean, that's what I think, because that way it's like you have the drama, because Patrick Stewart, his mental capacity is kind of starting to go, and he's concerned about how much time does he have left. And Riker is the admiral. He's the one who calls Picard up and says, hey, look, we need you to go do this. You're the only one who can go out there and go do this. And then, Seven is there as the expert, who's part of the team, and he can assemble, his own group, and it could be, new characters like what they did with the show, but they're Federation, they're Starfleet, they get an actual proper ship, they go out there and,
let's back up, Dave. We're getting backed up in the comments here. We have other pitches and stuff like that. So I do want to defer to Joss, because he says he was in the Navy 10 years as well. And I was not in for 10 years. And so we'll defer to you as our military consultant as far as that goes. I will defer to you on those matters. I'm happy to do that. He also says, is he under the care of Beverly Crusher again? He did this alternate world crap once before. And that is a good question. We do have some people that want Beverly. Katie says, my mother was a law enforcement officer. I'm somebody who likes uniforms and protocol, aka Star Trek. Can we get Beverly involved with Admiral Riker? I don't see any reason why we can't. I actually, even within the show, I thought there was kind of an easy thing because we're talking about calling Picard up. Right, Dave? We're talking about calling, like he's out of service, like maybe he's in the reserve. Right. We're calling him back up. Well, we can bring Beverly in to do his physical instead of the Stargazer guy we never saw before. You know what I mean? She could be the one that does like his fit for duty. He can kind of explain what's going on, where he's been. You can do all sorts of exposition in a scene like that too, where we can really get up to speed. You know what I mean? They may not have seen each other for a while because Beverly is still active. Picard has been inactive, that kind of a thing. So I definitely think it's a good idea to bring Beverly in. What do you think, Dave?
I agree. I mean, it could even be possible that she's part of the crew and she doesn't really give him a choice. And maybe she's the one who's kind of keeping an eye on him. That's definitely a way to go. Because
he still has the syndrome, right? I think we would stick with that. TNG, that he is ill.
Yeah, that's what gives us the ticking clock. Right. The idea that, that we need to resolve this quickly because Picard has this condition, so if we're going to, it kind of gives us a reason that there'd be a little bit of urgency in order to try and resolve what's happening, diplomatically in terms of the different tensions here between these different random groups that have all congregated at this one planet.
So let's kind of try to put together sort of a coherent pitch here, Dave. You're now the showrunner because PJ had to leave. Health conditions, whatever it was. He didn't get fired, by the way. I just want to make that clear. PJ wasn't fired, but he had to leave the show. So we had all these ideas going through. Let's try to put it together. What's sort of like a coherent kind of pitch for our idea that the Rogues Gallery helped us with, as far as what Star Trek Picard, our version of Star Trek Picard is.
Well, we obviously we're gonna do the Brexit idea, and so we've got our planet, we've got the XBs and the Hugh. They have their own kind of new civilization. We have the Synths that are kind of on the run from the Romulans, so they're basically wanting asylum. And the XB planet is tentatively looking to break away with a former Federation ally We will not have them actually been like a big member of the Federation, but former Federation ally, the Klingon Empire. And they're looking to, go to them for protection. And it could be because this planet is on the edge of Borg space, and the Borg are still very much an active threat. And we see the Borg, either through an opening scene or something where we see the Borg is still very much a threat, maybe even worse than before. And you could understand that the XBs are concerned about where they are. We could even tie this back into, before we go there, let's continue to move forward with the ideas from the writer's room. So the Klingons were a former ally of the Federation. They're looking to break away. They're going to give amnesty to the Synths. So we involve all these concepts. Admiral Riker, reaches out to Picard to call him up to say, hey, look, we've got this dicey situation. What we want to do is we want to pair you with 7 of 9. Annika, she is our Borg expert. She's been on the ground. She knows what's happening. She knows the players. But we need you to go out there in a diplomatic function. We're going to reestablish you as Admiral. We're going to give you a ship. You're going to assemble a team. We need you to go out there and get this situation under control before, it basically erupts into war between the Klingons and the Romulans on the edge of Federation space. And then therefore endangering formerly Federation citizens and the XBs. So that's where we kind of sit. Beverly Crusher is still active. Picard goes to her to get his physical. She clears him for duty with the stipulation that I'm coming with you because someone needs to monitor your condition and kind of help keep you on a good path. So Beverly's a part of the crew. She's the ship's doctor, but ideally she is mostly keeping tabs on Picard. And then we have 7 of 9. She might be.
Have one late pitch regarding that, which is it says Joss says, or is he stuck in a medical hologram program used for therapy for his condition and is struggling for control of his mind? And that's a pretty deep one. The idea that everything that's happening essentially is an illusion. And by the way, I thought this was a way to actually fix Picard the way it was, is that it was all a dream. We all kind of, on a previous episode, we kind of all decided that would be our only way to fix Picard where it was, is that it was all just a bad dream. But that's another idea too. Is all this really happening? Is what that's what the pitch comes down to. Is all this actually happening, or is it a delusion in Picard's dementia affected mind?
But see, here's the way I think we can enter into the idea that Picard mentally is having the problems. I like the idea that Picard is seeing data, and that data is essentially a figment of his imagination.
I love that. That's a great idea.
Whenever he's trying to make a decision, and he almost kind of like the way it used to be with Q. Remember, like Q would just turn around and he'd be sitting at the helm station talking to Picard. We could take this same idea, but instead of it being that, it's like this version of Data. And it's almost like Data is sort of like his Jiminy Cricket, his conscience, and is trying to give him advice. And to an extent, he believes that Data is still kind of real and with him as the show moves on. But in reality, Data is not there. Data is the sort of the figment of his imagination and part of the outgrowth of his condition. Because I don't want to go the same route that we did with All Good Things.
I love this actually, because I thought that's what they were going to do.
And I did too.
I think that's a great way to bring Spiner back and to bring Data back, is that he's just a figment of Picard's imagination. And it shows the degradation of this affliction that's happening to Picard, and he's dealing with it with this projection of Data. You know what I mean? And Data is kind of like his conscience or whatever, because he's losing his mind, you know what I mean, because of the rigors of his disease. But almost like also Data is kind of like keeping him in check, keeping him maybe from losing it. You know what I mean? Like, I think something like that would be kind of cool.
And here's the way we do the finale, where we pull the rug out from everyone and really put everything into question, what's going on. There's a moment where Picard is talking to his figment imagination of Data, and Beverly can actually see him, and she's like, that's not a figment. what's going on, and he turns around and it's not Data, it's actually Q, and Q has kind of been pulling the strings all along. So I think that's our interesting sort of ending. Is it turns out the figment of his imagination, he thinks is Data, turns out it's actually been Q all along,
and it's not a delusion. It turns out it's not a delusion. We think it's a delusion all the way episode, that it's part of the affliction, but it turns out it was Q helping Picard, because Picard is starting to kind of lose it. You know what I mean? So because Picard kind of is starting to lose it, and Q has been helping him to keep it together so that that he can do the mission. I love that. That gave me chills. I think that's a great idea. You know, I think that would be really cool.
You know, still at times, you know, a bit, Mike Lombard mischievous. You know what I mean? But,
Mike Lombard says Data equals Jiminy Cricket. Yeah, I think that's the idea we're talking about, and I think that's a great idea. But it turns out it's actually Q. It's just that Brent Spiner gets to do most of the acting, but at the very end, it's John DeLance gets to do a little appearance. You know what I mean, and say like whatever. I've been looking out for you, Picard, or whatever, that kind of a thing. And I like that. I think I like that a lot. That actually I think almost like makes the show right there. That would be a cool thing.
You want that twist at the end that's going to bring you back for season 2, and then it turns into, well, what is Q's ultimate goal? Why is he concerned about what's happening between the Borg and the Sense? But at the same point, too, it's interesting because Q is the one who introduced us to the Borg. So it kind of helps historically to tie it back together, that maybe the last Borg story, that Q plays a role.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, too. Yeah, because it kind of puts everything into a package. Now, Josh says we got to throw in a tribble. I think you can do that. We can throw in a tribble, right? We can have a tribble. I don't think that's a big deal. And Jane does say, I think Picard would trust Data, not Q, and that's kind of the idea.
Right, exactly.
If Q was just doing it as Q, Picard wouldn't trust any of the advice. But because he feels that it's sort of this manifestation of his mental degradation, and it is manifesting as these visions of Data, then he would trust the advice. You know what I mean? Because he would perceive it as it's just like him having a conversation with himself because he misses his best friend so much. That's the way I would interpret it. Like he just misses him so much. I do like the guilt, the idea that Picard would feel guilty for Data's death, and that would have a very profound effect on him. You know what I mean? That he'd feel really bad about that. And so Katie also asks, can Seven have a daughter named Catherine who can befriend Soji if we have Soji in this? Thanks. And I don't think there's anything wrong with Seven having a daughter. I think that's fine. What do you think, Dave? I think we could. No. If we have Seven, she can have a daughter. But she can have a daughter with Chakotay, as far as I'm concerned. I think that's fine.
Yeah, we could have a scene where, Seven's getting ready to go on the mission, and we see, Chakotay, we see, her daughter, and she's kind of saying good, she's like, hey, I'm going to ship out. I'm going with Picard to go take care of this thing. I'll be back before you know it. She could still we could see her having like, either hollow conversations or something like, during the different episodes. You can totally do all of that.
I think it's important to point out she is part of the crack team. She is not the bitter, broken, you know what I mean, suicidal alcoholic. She is like 7 of 9. She is like important in the Federation and all that kind of stuff.
I was going to say that, Picard is Admiral and he's there to lead the diplomatic mission. Why can't 7 of 9 be the captain of the starship? Because she's been the one that's been on the ground managing the situation. Now Picard is coming in not just to represent Starfleet, but to also represent the Federation. And it's her ship. Why not? Let's just do that. I think that would be really cool. It's 7's ship. She's the captain, and Picard is the one who's hitching the ride. So.
And PJ did and our old showrunner came back and he said some great ideas, everyone. And I think that's a good way to kind of leave it, because PJ did come and say that. He was our original showrunner after all. For undisclosed reasons. But I think we have something here. I mean, I really do. I think I really like the whole data as Q thing. I think that's really cool. I think that'd be really a neat way to deal with it and to bring Spiner back. We can, bring John Delancey, pronounce his name. Delancey, bringing him back at the very end, basically like at the last episode, like, ooh, it's me, you know what I mean? All this time, And then Josh does add with Seven. It says, or Seven is the science admiral attached to the diplomatic delegation. I kind of thought that too, not science admiral, but I thought more like, what if she is kind of like in the science division? You know what I mean? Like still not Starfleet, because I do think it's kind of interesting. If you notice in Voyager, Seven never joined Starfleet. She never had a Starfleet uniform, whereas Icheb specifically became a cadet. So I do kind of see that, because as far as Seven's character, it seems to me there was some reason. We don't really necessarily hear it, but Seven never joined Starfleet in Voyager. She was part of the crew, but she never donned the uniform. She never seemed to have any interest in that. So I kind of do like that idea a little bit of her being kind of like maybe like the science person, because we've had that precedence where there is like a science division in the Federation that is like apart from Starfleet, that's just science. So they don't get into any of the like more of the conflict type stuff and things like that. We've seen that, Federation scientists who are not Starfleet.
It can still be a science starship. Yeah, we've seen that going back to Star Trek 3, The Wrath of Khan. The USS Grissom was a science vessel, and they still technically had a captain. I just love the idea of Seven being a captain. And so instead of it just being a regular starship, maybe it is a science vessel.
Yeah, I think that's the idea. Personally.
Yeah, their main mission is exploration, right? And and that kind of also brings back to the idea why Picard would be involved. She's been there helping to coordinate with Hugh and figure out what's going on, and now they're trying to break away. And then it's sort of like, well, we need someone else to step in to try and mitigate this, and it explains why Picard might be sent out there as a diplomat, in order to assess the situation.
Katie mentions that Chakotay asked Seven in Endgame what she wanted to do, and she said, I suppose Starfleet will debrief me, and then I'll try to find a useful position somewhere. So that is pretty open-ended as far as where she basically was saying that she thought that they would find some use for her, you know what I mean? But she didn't. She left it kind of open-ended. And PJ does say he likes the science vessel idea. He likes the idea of the science vessel, and he also likes Katie's point and everything like that, as far as what Seven actually said in Endgame in her last appearance in Voyager, that Starfleet will find a use for me somewhere, I imagine, which makes sense.
Well, and the fun thing for us as Trek fans is we only see the USS Grissom for a brief period of time, and we don't really learn what makes a science, vessel different from, like the Enterprise, which is an exploration vehicle, a starship, or any of the other, like we know the Reliant, what I think was
we do. They're really pathetic. They're very like lightly armed and lightly shielded, and they're pathetic ships. We did get that from the Grissom. It was blown away in like one shot. So,
but again, that just heightens the tension, because if things start going sideways and they have to actually defend themselves, there's a real sense of threat. That's what I'm saying. Picard's mental condition, that's a ticking clock. The fact that they're not on a regular Federation starship means they're more at risk and danger than normal. I like because it's a way to introduce drama and tension just by how the table is set. But also, too, the thing I really like, too, I think for us as Trek fans, is we can see why a science vessel is different from a regular starship.
Right.
Beyond the fact
you're right. We haven't really explored that. Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe there are some deficiencies on the ship. Maybe they're having to kind of work around.
That increases tension if it's a quote unquote science vessel. It's not like a first contact vessel. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like a science vessel. So it's got a smaller crew. It's smaller in size. It has less armaments. The shields aren't as good. and that does put them in jeopardy pretty easily. You know what I mean? In any situation, because they're kind of underpowered. You know?
Yeah, I think that there's something really interesting there, that they're just not sent out in the latest of the greatest whatever kind of ship.
Right.
But it kind of,
crew. That's the point. It doesn't have to be a motley crew. We can get to the same place, kind of where Shaban and all them went, but we can do it in a Trek way and make it still within Trek, still make it Starfleet. You know what I mean?
Well, and we can take the Rios idea, for example, the different holograms. They're doing different things on the ship. You could have a whole episode where things are going sideways, and the bridge crew is not on the bridge, and there's this. It wouldn't necessarily be Rios, but you could have a Barclay type character or whatever, and he activates all these different, emergency holograms, and basically they're sort of in charge of the ship. Like there's a lot of interesting ideas, that we can take. And
Katie, speaking of Barclay, she says theory, and Endgame Barclay said Admiral Jamie wrote the book on the board, and it would kind of make sense to bring Janeway in at some point. And PJ points out, yeah, Dave, and all good things like Beverly Crusher's ship, because she was on a medical ship, and her ship was pathetic. Her ship was pathetic too. I remember that. And I like the idea of Barclay with the holograms, because that's taking an idea that they a kind of fun idea they had in Star Trek Picard. You could even have Barclay, have Dwight Schultz come back, which would be pretty cool, I think, in a position, and having like a holographic crew. That'd be kind of a neat idea. I like that. But Katie touched on it about Janeway.
Right.
Do we have Janeway come in here at some point because of her knowledge of the Borg, which does make sense?
Right. Well, then, if we want to take that concept and work it in, then it could be Janeway that reaches out to Picard instead of Riker. And maybe there's a series of events towards the end of the episode, but either before or after the Q reveal, and maybe it looks like everything has gone bad. The Romulans and the Klingons are about to go to war. The XBs, the Synths are on the crosshairs. And maybe kind of like what they did here, maybe Riker shows up, but in a purely defensive capacity, because the science vessel can't possibly withstand what they're about to endure.
Well, the other thing you can have is we actually did it with one of our previous writers' rooms, where we kind of talked about the idea of when Picard was going to go to basically, sort of the confrontation with the Romulans. We were going to kind of do a situation where they actually went to Deep Space 12 to meet up with Janeway, because she's the one in charge of the fleet. So I think it would be kind of cool, because Nemesis, it was established that Janeway was an admiral, and she became an admiral before Picard. Why not make her like the head of Starfleet? You know what I mean? Yeah. And she could be the one that leads the cavalry charge, kind of takes sort of the Riker role, if you will, in Star Trek Picard. She's the one who rescues them. You know what I mean? Like, she's the one that shows up in charge of the fleet and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
that would be a way into her as well. And there will be no sheer fucking hubris line. You know what I mean? It'll just be like, they're old friends. They respect each other. She backs him all the way. You know what I mean? But no sheer fucking hubris line. You know what I mean? None of that.
No, but I think, that's another way to go. So, I think, in all honesty, I think we put together something for me anyway that would have been more entertaining and interesting. So
there's no doubt. I think there's no doubt. And I want to say I appreciate the participation of the Rogues Gallery and people putting out the ideas out there. And PJ did say exploring the science vessels like they did in some novels was very, very interesting. And I'm not aware of those particular novels, PJ, but I know the novels explored all sorts of different facets of Trek that we never saw. But we do kind of have, like I said, we mentioned in Star Trek 3, you have the Grissom. And then, as PJ mentioned, we do have what we saw of Beverly Crusher's ship in the alternate future, you know what I mean, as far as the medical ship. So,
the Pasteur.
Yeah, it would be kind of a neat way to kind of put them in very much the same situation they were in Star Trek Picard, but it's still Starfleet. You know what I mean? It's still Trek. It's not like a bunch of degenerates running around in space, you know?
Right, right.
And Katie points out in Nemesis, Picard and Janeway knew each other. Says, Admiral Janeway, how good to see you again. That's the line that Picard says. I mentioned that too when we were talking about that in a previous episode. It's very clear in Nemesis that Picard and Janeway know each other. Probably for when they were younger officers or something like that. And of course, they know each other by reputation. Obviously, you know what I mean. So you get that just in the little interaction on Nemesis. You get that immediately. You don't need lines, or anything like that. You just, like I said, it's a warm greeting. I know who you are, and we're into it. It's not like, hey, JL, what's going on? It's just that we're chums. We're friends. No JL, please, no JL, Dave. No JLs in this.
There won't be any of that. It didn't make any sense to me when we read it in the comic, let alone when I had to actually watch it in the show. So
yeah,
none of that.
I think we did pretty good. I mean, we're at 2 hours now, and we had a pretty lively discussion as far as the writer's room and everything like that, and a review of Picard. Are you good to kind of move on, or what do you think?
Yeah, I am. I want to thank everyone for your suggestions. I thought we have cobbled together an interesting show. I think that this is much more entertaining and interesting, and I think has more room to explore different ideas. My only other idea I was trying to work in there was that there was, quote unquote, really going to be a quote unquote destroyer of worlds amongst the synths, but it was actually going to turn out it was Lore, and he had actually lost part of his memories, and he was kind of amongst the synths in the population. And it's almost like with Q, it was just going to be a brief, we were just going to see him just briefly, so people would kind of go, and that would be it. So again, just setting up more stuff for season 2 for people to want to come back. It's like, what's going on? Is that Lore? What? So.
And then Katie says she's got to take off, but she says, got to go, good night, and hashtag Rottenberry lives. And then also hashtag Noz, N-O-Z, which that one I don't know what that references. Do you, Dave? N-O-Z?
No, I do not, unfortunately.
But Roddenberry lives. I will definitely. That's a hashtag that I need to start using. Oh, she said it was a typo. Oops. Hashtag no STP. Yes, I do like that. I will start using that.
but I like the Stone Temple Pilots. What are you talking about?
No, I'm with you, Katie. I'm with you. So good night, and thank you for your comments. We appreciate it.
Good night. Thank you. All right. So if that's good, are we going to move on to pop culture news, perhaps, or do we want to cut
go ahead and, let's go ahead and move on to that.
Okay. All right. Cool. All right. So we're going to segue over here into our pop culture news segment. Here on the Pop Culture News, we talk about anything interesting happening in the world, obviously, of pop culture news that has actually caught our interest. There's a lot of stuff to talk about in pop culture news. Eric and I discussed it previously. We want to try and stay positive. There's a lot of things going on in the comic industry. I think a lot of people are aware of them. They've read the headlines or they're directly involved in it in some manner. I don't have a lot of interesting insight into it other than to say that what's currently going on is unfortunate. And that hopefully we can all find a way through. And by we, I'm talking about comic book fans, that we can all find a way to come together and find a solution that works for the local comic store, that works for the fan, that works for everyone. And then all of my pop culture news are just kind of warm, fuzzy.
Well, Dave, speaking of that, I do have some interesting news on that front that is positive. So we have a comic CBR, CBR.com, comicbookreview.com article. It says, report, publishers develop temporary distribution solution via Comic Hub. It says, due to the Diamond Comic Distributors shutdown, the industry will use Comic Hub to give readers access to digital books with print copies to follow. So it says, following the shutdown of Diamond Comics distributors due to the coronavirus, the comic book industry has devised a temporary solution to get new books into the hands of readers. According to Bleeding Cool, and it says this is collaborated by retailer Ryan Higgins of Comics Conspiracy in Sunnyvale, California. Within the next 2 weeks, you'll be able to buy a physical comic from your local comic book store anywhere on Earth online. You'll be able to read a digital copy the minute you buy it. Your local comic book store will get a free physical copy to give you later. And here it is. Within the next 2 weeks, you'll be able to buy a physical comic from your local comic book store. This is actually the post from Ryan Higgins. It says you'll be able to read a digital copy the minute you buy it. Your local comic book store will get a free physical copy to give you later. The temporary distribution method will be implemented via Comic Hub, a point-of-sale system used by retailers that allows readers to purchase books from their local comic book shops online. The tool already lets publishers upload preview pages, but now they'll simply upload full digital copies of the books to give readers instant access. Then once shipping resumes, they can redeem those digital copies for physical ones from their local comic book store. As for the rollout, the new system is expected to begin on April 8th among the 100 existing Comic Hub partnered stores. This will expand to Comics Pro stores the next day, and by Wednesday, April 15th, it should be in effect across the entire direct market. What do you think of that, Dave, as a solution to all this?
Well, it is a way forward. I think anything that essentially minimizes the bottleneck that is created, obviously, with just one major distributor is a good idea. Just because it's the whole, all the eggs in one basket. That's basically what caused this. I don't want to get too far into this. I have some very strong opinions about this, having actually been a former independent comic book publisher, and obviously as a former comic book professional, having worked for a lot of the major companies. I do think this is a good way forward in the short term. The distribution problem is sort of a problem that's existed for a long time. There's a question of access for independent publishers. There's a lot of minutia to this. It's way too much to unpack. But I do think that right now, for the current situation that the industry finds itself in, this is a way forward in the short term.
Are you familiar with Comic Book Hub?
I'm not familiar with Comic Hub just because it's a my understanding is some sort of a point of purchase and sort of like system that they're using, I think, so people can preview books in order before you buy them. There's been a bunch of different systems and things that have been in place over the years. But no, I'm not too terribly familiar with this particular one. When I was self-publishing, I don't think this actually existed at the time. So what's interesting is
I know from books that I've bought, there's a lot of physical books you buy, and they have a digital code, so you can get the digital version of the comic. What this is doing is the exact opposite. So essentially, as I understand it, you'd be buying the digital copy immediately. You get the digital copy, and then you would actually get you'd have a credit essentially that you can go to your local store and pick up the physical version. And I think that's a really interesting idea. I don't know how well it would actually work in practice, but I think it's a great idea. I think it's a really neat idea.
I think the one thing that this does do in a weird way, and I only know this again because I'm I still do comics, but it's weird because I'm not like a major Marvel or DC guy right now. Like I'm not currently on the technically I'm still on the DC's talent. Right? Okay, that's complicated. Let me just say this, okay? The one thing I see, okay, because I do actually still see royalties for comics and digital versions of books that are sold, for example, things that I worked on. I do see that if you're purchasing a digital copy of a book and then you get the print one later, for DC anyway, with their current existing system in terms of how the royalty plan and the royalty system works, this is going to cause some hiccups and some snafus. And I've also seen some additional reporting that DC is going to use different channels in order to just still get physical copies out to people. So I don't know if this announcement necessarily includes DC in it. If it includes Marvel in it, if this is something that primarily has been agreed upon by the independent companies, because I know that a lot of the independent publishers came out and issued a statement, we want to work with you and figure out a way forward. So without knowing exactly, you know what I mean, who this involves, because it doesn't say in terms of what publishers are involved.
Right.
I know that for DC anyway, it creates a weird potential problem because of the current existing system as far as how royalty payments are essentially metered out, because you get a smaller percentage.
How does it work with digital comics in general?
Well, you see a percentage of physical copy sales, and then you also see a percentage for digital. You see what I'm saying? So if you're giving one away, then do you see? You see what I'm saying? It's like the way the system currently exists.
Like I was mentioning, with the ones where you have like a little code, like where you buy the physical book and then it has it's in the book. It tells you just go to this site and get your digital copy. How does that work? But
that's Marvel, and Marvel's royalty plan doesn't work the same way as DC's does. Right. That's what I'm talking about. It's depending upon the publisher, depending upon how they're doing this, or they are or are not paying royalties. For example, some of the publishers who don't pay royalties, this is a perfectly fine solution for them. They're not looking to compensate the creators for a digital sale versus a physical sale. A physical sale is the only thing that counts. Digital doesn't matter, right? But if digital is the way forward, if digital is the future, it should count. It should matter, because then you're impacting the creators in a different way. I don't know. That's what I'm saying. It's an interesting solution in the short term, but from the business standpoint, depending upon the current systems in place, it does cause some weird problems. For example, like getting a credit on a book is a big deal because it basically puts you into the royalty system at DC. And then depending upon the amount of contribution you make to the book, you either qualify for that or you don't. So it's kind of this. It's a thing. It could cause a problem. I don't know how else to say it. I can just tell you right now, if they haven't worked this out with Warner's, if they haven't worked this out with DC, I don't know if they're necessarily going to be a part of this. Again, it's just my opinion. I don't know anything. I don't currently have any direct contact with anyone on editorial or in the talent division at DC right now. So I don't know if it's going to be an issue, but just from the business side, because of how the previously existing system is, it could cause a problem. Now, on the flip side, I could get an email tomorrow. They could outline this plan and say, we need you to sign this new document. Here is how the program is going to be changed. These are the reasons why. We hope that you will be a part of it. And then it's just on me to just say, sure, okay, digital signature, send, and then I just agree that I'm okay with the new plan based off of the current market conditions. So
it seems like this would definitely, though, it would probably work for independent creators that aren't doing, creator-owned projects and things like that. Image comes to mind, something like that. Like it wouldn't have that issue. You know what I mean?
No, and that's what I'm saying. It for the independent companies, this sounds like a great plan for them. Because for them, a digital is just maybe an extra sale. So it doesn't really, if they have to give a digital away to sell a physical, they're going to be okay with that. It doesn't impact them. But when you look at the larger publishers and how the royalty system and the incentivized system and everything works, potentially this causes some wrinkles. It causes potentially some problems.
Josh says we're back to mail order subscriptions that we had back in the 1970s. I guess in a way you could say it's like that, but it's definitely got a modern twist. I wouldn't say that's exactly the same thing, because you're going to have some sort of essentially like a gift card credit system. You know what I mean? That every retailer can be plugged into. Essentially, it's like having a universal, like a Visa card or something like that, like a universal gift card, where basically you're going to cash in your credit to get the physical copy, and then the retailer is going to get paid. You know what I mean? The retailer is going to get paid to give you that book. So it is a little bit more advanced, I think, than your 70s mail order subscription.
It's very, it's much more complicated. So
But Jane asked the legitimate questions. Will this make artists earn less? And I think we've kind of said that it depends, right? Because if you're an independent creator, no, I don't think so. You know what I mean? A sale is a sale. So, it also goes back to, by the way, they do this with music too. Like, for instance, when you buy a vinyl record, most vinyl records have a digital download code. So you can go to iTunes or something and get that. And I don't know how that works, because you're only paying once. You pay for the vinyl copy. You're not paying for the digital copy. The digital copy is essentially free, or it's included somehow in the price of the vinyl record. Because I have records like that. You know what I mean? So it's a similar model, except it's reversed. It's reversed. It goes the other way, where I'm buying the digital first. I get the digital instantly. Now I have a credit, and I can redeem that for a physical copy. I do think that's innovative. I think that's a really neat idea. I don't know how in practical terms how it would work, but I just think it's a neat idea.
This is an idea that was put forward years and years ago, and there's just been reluctance to try and even move towards this model. And in terms of answering the question, will the artists earn less? Here's another aspect of this you have to consider. There's this concept that sales is everyone's job. Okay, I think sometimes certain artists, writers, or whatever, they don't understand this concept, because at the end of the day, as a creator, sales is everyone's job. By that, I mean your brand, what you represent, how you are able to help sell the book, move the book for the publisher is part of what you bring to the title. If you have a large following, you're going to help them sell more books. If you have no following, you will not help them at all. Now, along these same lines, if you're buying a digital copy, you get a physical copy later, technically it counts as one sale. True. But you also have to understand there's value to that for the creator beyond just that initial one sale. If you're on a high-profile book, it increases your brand. Through your brand, you could use that to sell your other independent titles, or you could use that in order to help build your audience in order to sell more commissions, more sketches, more whatever. So at the end of the day, it doesn't necessarily mean the artist earns less unless they're not correctly business-minded. If you understand at the end of the day, this is a business, okay, sales is my job. If they're helping me to promote and build my brand, then you're also thinking, I'm going to do the best I can for them, but I'm also going to do that number two for me, because it helps me build my brand. And I'm going to, while I'm helping them sell their book, I'm going to find ways that I can monetize what I represent, in order to make sure that I actually make more money. It's the same, it's you just have to think in terms of this is a business, and how can I make the best of this opportunity? How can I do right by my employer? How can I do right by my publisher? But at the same point, how can I also do right by me? You should always be looking out for your interests at the end of the day. And sometimes it is better to make a little bit less for a greater opportunity, because it may have a greater payout down the road. If you're looking in terms of I'm building an audience, I'm building a reader base, how can I better serve them? That's going to pay more dividends down the road. It's all about how you look at it, how you look at the opportunity, and how you weigh how it's beneficial, hopefully, to everyone.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Now, did you have a pop culture news story, Dave?
I do have a couple. They're just real quick. Let me pull. I'm going to pull this one up first. If you'll share my screen. Okay, so this is on Syfywire. We covered this somewhat recently on the show. They just have a preview here, actually, for this Batman the Animated Series comic series that would have been talked about before. This is first look. Batman the Animated Series lives on in DC Comics' new Batman series. It just spawned from the world of Batman the Animated Series with his triumphant Emmy award-winning run from 1992 to 1995. DC Comics is dipping back into the nostalgic well of that pioneering show that redefined the way the Dark Knight was interpreted in an invigorating 6-issue miniseries. And Syfywire is here, delivering a first look at the premiere issue alongside comments from its stellar creative team. So we're not going to get too far into this, but Paul Dini, Alan Burnett are the two writers involved with this. Ty Templeton's involved. Ty Templeton actually worked on the original Batman animated comics back in the day. It's a stellar creative team. This article is by, I guess it's Jeff Spry. I hope I'm saying that correctly. But it's over on syfywire.com. I just recommend you just kind of go over there and take a look at it. This same information is available on other comics news sites as well. They've just got some preview images from the comic as a digital first series. With the digital first series, it's completely different than a print that you're also selling as a digital. So in terms of the question we had before, this doesn't really apply. It's a completely different thing. It's a completely different contract. But this series looks interesting. It looks like I think a lot of people enjoy it. So I just recommend people, swing on over to sci-fi.com.
Is that artwork from the series?
Yeah, that's actually the cover right here.
Wow, I just have to say I don't like it. I mean, it doesn't look like the animated series to me. Let me zoom in a little bit. But
this is just the cover. The actual interiors look like this.
Okay, that's better. That's better. I don't like the cover. I'll tell you that. I don't like the cover, but that's better. That's much better right there.
But you can see right here it follows the style.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I like that. But I do not like that cover. That cover does not look like the animated series to me.
I kind of like the cover, so it doesn't bother me. So
I don't like it. I'm a big Batman animated fan, and that would not draw me in. And the cover is very important, especially for a casual fan. You know what I mean? The cover is what draws you in, and if that doesn't give you that instant recognition, give you that jolt of this is the animated series, and this is I've been waiting for this. I don't know. That's just my impression.
Right.
I haven't seen this before. I just saw it right now with you putting it out there. So
right. Well, like I said, it's worth taking a look at if you're a fan of Batman the Animated Series. So,
but I do like the interior artwork you're showing me. That does look like the animated series to me. That looks like
it's very much that style. Yeah. So, and then it looks like James actually had a comment. He said, if you wouldn't mind putting it up, I think this is in relation to what we were talking about before with the previous pop culture news story. But he says, but just don't do art for fans who want to pay you with exposure. Oh, well, exposure is only good for two things: heat stroke, and was it hypothermia? And I forget. I used to have a joke for that, James. Now I was completely blanking on it. The end of the day is like you will die out in the cold of exposure. So
he does. He also mentions, he says DC is ending their animated movie universe with the new Justice League Dark movie. But you talked about Justice League Dark before. I thought that was a live action project.
No, it's actually an animated project. And James is correct. They are ending that. But that's the one that's sort of in continuity. That's kind of the more new 52 versions of it, is my understanding, because I did look into it.
That's what JJ is doing, right? J.J. Abrams is doing that?
No. This is the animated. J.J. Abrams has nothing to do with any of that.
What was the one J.J. Abrams was doing that you talked about in a previous
He was rumored to be working on a Justice League Dark live action film.
Okay, well, that's what I was talking about. That's why I'm confused. Okay, so there's two different projects. There's two different Justice League Dark projects, essentially.
Yes, one involves a dark side, and then there's this other live action. The one that James is referring to is actually the animated versions, because like Throne of Atlantis, Batman versus Robin, Son of Batman, all these different things that they've been doing in the animated. The newer of the animated films, the Justice League, the different Justice League ones they've done, they've all been sort of loosely the new 52 DC continuity. They've been having like the same voice actors come back to do different roles. So all of the different animated films of recently have been kind of working together to kind of build one overarching narrative. And that's coming to an end with the current production that they're doing. But my understanding, James, is that they're going to continue to still do things like Superman Red Son, Batman Gotham by Gaslight, and some of their newer ones, the Dark Knight two-parter that had Peter Weller, that they're going to still continue to do those, is my understanding. So.
Gotcha.
So this was and one of my main ones, and I think I'm going to go ahead and skip my second one and go right to my third one, just for sake of time. If you wouldn't mind putting up, Eric, that banner I asked you to create earlier.
Let me find it here. There we go.
Cool. Thank you. So for those of you who have kids, those of you who like to draw or have children who like to draw, this is a really unique and fun opportunity. I got this email actually from the Kubert School actually yesterday. And this is a really fun thing that the Kubert School is doing. Now, for those of you who do not know, the Kubert School of Cartoon and Sequential Art or Graphic Art, I forget what they're calling it right now. The Kubert School was actually founded by Joe Kubert many, many years ago. And it is still probably the industry leader in terms of educating people in terms of how to do comic book sequential art. They used to have an animation division. The Kubert School is one of the industry standards. So many of the comic pros have either been touched, influenced, or actually educated at the Kubert School. I actually did a summer institute many years ago with Joe Kubert himself and Jose Delbo, Oren Hasten. Like, it was a tremendous, unique opportunity. The Kubert School also does the correspondence courses that some people are familiar with. But in Dover, New Jersey, they actually have an actual physical building where they teach classes. Over the summer, and sometimes what they'll do is they will do free classes on Saturday for members of the community, children, such on and so forth. What's going on? Obviously, that's a little bit more difficult. So I got an email about this earlier, and basically what it says is the Kubert School is going to be offering free kids classes. Now, let me get into this just real quickly. They say, we know it's been tough lately, being home every day. Kids and parents are looking for something fun, creative, and free to do. The Kubert School is proud to announce the Kubert School online kids classes. Kids of all ages and all skill levels can draw along as they enjoy live online art instruction from some of the best artists in the industry. And that's true. For every Saturday in the month of April, the Kubert School will have a different guest artist giving free art instruction to anyone who watches the classes on their Facebook page. So if you notice right here, we've got on the banner, the Kubert School on Facebook. That's going to be what you want to search for. So basically, each Saturday online kids class will be held at 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. That's Eastern Standard Time. The only supplies that you will need is a piece of paper, crayons, pencils, or markers, and a big imagination. They're also excited to announce that they have Fernando Ruiz, Maria Sinapo, I may be pronouncing it incorrectly, Sergio Carrillo, and Lee Weeks all donating their time to help inspire the next generation of artists. So get ready to have fun on Saturday mornings this month with the Kubert School online kids classes. Current schedule is April 4th, it's going to be Fernando Ruiz. April 11th, it'll be Maria Sinapo, I may be pronouncing it incorrectly. On the 18th is going to be Sergio Carrillo, who I'm a huge fan of for his work on Lone Ranger. And then on the 25th, it is going to be the one, the only, the legendary Lee Weeks, artist of Daredevil and Batman fame. So this is a really unique and fun opportunity. So definitely search out the Kubert School on Facebook. Definitely, if you have kids or you're interested in art or you have kids who like to draw, this is a really awesome, tremendous opportunity. I would definitely take the Kubert School up on this. You will not be disappointed. I am not being paid to do this. It's not a paid advertisement. I just am a huge believer in the Kubert School. Again, I have personally benefited from their instruction. The time that, Joe and Jose and everybody took with me helped me to basically have a career that's lasted almost 30 years. I cannot recommend this enough. Definitely check it out. It's a huge, tremendous opportunity. If nothing else, it's a fun way to spend a Saturday. So that's going to be my last story actually for pop culture news on this episode.
Joss mentioned, I think he's talking about this story. It says Fernando and Anthony have been doing shows and talk about this, and they said there's been a huge response. And then Bob was just saying, awesome, thank you for sharing that.
No, yeah, I mean, the Kubert School is the premier in my mind. They are the leader in the industry in terms of education if you want to learn how to do narrative art. By narrative art, I'm talking about it in the way that Will Eisner talks about it in comics and sequential art, and we're talking about taking images, putting them in obviously the comic book form and telling a story. They are the premier. They are the leader, still in my mind. The fact that they're doing this is really awesome. So especially for kids who like to draw and families, this is a really, really awesome opportunity, and I would definitely take them up on it.
Very, very cool.
Awesome. All right, so if that's good, are we You good to segue over into streaming wars?
I had one more pop culture here.
Oh, okay. Go right ahead. My bad.
I've been wanting to do something like this. I still have dreams of somehow getting Twitch to have some activity, which isn't happening right now. So I got to throw in a gaming news thing. I tried to do one last week, and we had no time. Where I have timing problems this time too, but I'm going to do one at least. So Activision, they have come out with Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. So announcing Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 campaign remastered, featuring the UDT Classic Ghost Bundle for instant access in Call of Duty Modern Warfare, including Call of Duty Warzone. Relive this classic campaign now fully remastered in HD and get the Underwater Demo Team Classic Ghost Bundle that can be equipped instantly for play in Call of Duty Modern Warfare, Multiplayer, Special Ops, and Warzone free. So this is a big thing for a lot of people that are into the Call of Duty series, which is one of the biggest video game franchises of all time. This is a remaster of Modern Warfare 2, which basically means it's going to be updated graphics, better graphics, and it's updated for the current generation systems. One thing that I did see a lot of people talking about was that this is initially coming out on the PlayStation 4. I do have a PlayStation 4, although I'm not a huge Call of Duty guy. I do own some Call of Duty games. Not any for the PlayStation 4, though. But a lot of fans are upset because it's not out for Xbox yet and not out for the Nintendo for the Switch. But it is coming out, I think, right away, pretty much, for the PlayStation 4. A lot of people have been looking forward to this. This is considered like one of the best Call of Duty games, Modern Warfare 2. So a lot of people are looking forward to this. And I just wanted to throw that out there. Again, in the vain hope that maybe I can get some Twitch activity.
All right. Well, very cool. Unfortunately, I'm not much of a gamer, so I haven't been for many years. But I do know people who actually work on the Call of Duty games, so there's a fun, interesting connection. Actually, one of them actually contributed to a cover that Scott Clark and I did actually for Superboy and the Legion of Superheroes. He actually helped come in and do some of the CGI portion of that cover. So
that's very cool. Very cool. And also going back to the Kubert story, Josh says, also a lot of artists are sharing black and white images asking people to color and post their work, which is that sounds like a really cool thing. I know my kids will probably be into that. So that's a neat idea as well.
Yes, most definitely. And again here, just real quick, since we've got just a brief lull, I'm going to throw this out there to the group. We had it so far. Punisher is the only one that's been suggested. We were talking about what sketch card to give away on this episode. So again, we've got the Punisher here. This is one of the ones that I think it was it Bobby who suggested? He said we do the Punisher tonight. So we've got the Punisher card. Another one we could possibly pick is this Batman card. Again, there's original art sketch cards. We also have the Batman animated series one I did the other night. And then I also suggested, if anyone was curious, we could even possibly do the Marvel Greatest Battles official card. There's actually two cards in one that actually I drew the other night live on Facebook. And this, of course, features Daredevil fighting Iron Fist. So if anyone wants to register their vote, so far we have one vote for Punisher, but we do need your help to figure out what are we giving away on tonight's episode for commenting during the Retro Rokes Live. All right, so are we good to go to Streaming Wars at this point, or?
Yeah, I'm good with that. We're pretty heavy on time right now, so
okay,
we're pretty light on time right now. So,
all right, so I'm going to be honest with you. If you want to segue over, I'll set it up. If you share my screen,
if I can get it to share. There we go.
All right, cool. All right, so on this segment, we're talking about Streaming Wars. This is basically anything interesting happening on the news side in terms of the various streaming services, whether we're talking about Netflix, whether we're talking about Alpha Plus, if anyone's even talking about that anymore, whether we're talking about Disney Plus or the Peacock or HBO Max or whatever else. This is where we actually talk about all the interesting things that have caught our interest in the world of the streaming wars. So tell me, Eric, what do you have for this week's installment of the streaming wars?
All right. So this is an interesting story here. And I've heard a lot of different spin going both ways on this. And I'm going to present kind of, I guess, both sides of that. So in the wake of everything going on, Bob Iger is to forego, this is a Hollywood Reporter article, sorry about that. Hollywood Reporter, this is from March 30th. It says Bob Iger to forego Disney salary, top execs to take pay cuts amid virus crisis. We've got a picture here of Bob Iger and of Bob Chapek. And so it says CEO Bob Chapek will take a 50% pay reduction. It says the Walt Disney Company said Monday that executive chairman Bob Iger will forego his entire salary, and recently named CEO Bob Chapek will take a 50% pay cut to his base salary amid the coronavirus pandemic. This is according to an email from Chapek sent to employees that was obtained by the Hollywood Reporter. The news comes days after the company made the decision to keep all North American theme parks closed until further notice. Other executives at Disney will also take salary cuts, according to the email. Iger has been among the top paid executives in the entertainment and media sector. In the latest fiscal year, he earned $47.5 million as chairman and CEO, down from $65.6 million in fiscal 2018. Chapek's base salary as CEO is $2.5 million, with an annual target bonus of $7.5 million and an annual long-term incentive grant of $15 million. The 50% pay cut applies to his base salary, not to his entire compensation package. So it also said effective April 5th, all VPs will have their salaries reduced by 20%, SVPs, senior vice presidents, by 25%, and EVPs, I assume that means like executive vice presidents, and above by 30%. Said, he continued, as we navigate through these uncharted waters, we're asking much of you. And as always, you are rising to the challenge, and we appreciate your support. Your dedication and resilience during this difficult time are truly inspiring, and it gives me renewed confidence that we will come through this crisis even stronger than before. We have so many times, well, I believe he means as we have so many times in our company's history. This article mentions that they are paying quite a few employees in the midst of the shutdown of the theme parks. So there's two different takes that's going on basically with this story. Okay, one is that I'm going to go with the negative first because I like to start off negative and leave positive. So the negative one would be that they're going broke. They are in bad fiscal shape, and they need to do this because they are running out of money and they do not have the cash to withstand the storm. So they need to make some drastic cuts, and the guys on top know it, so they're doing it. The more positive spin on this would be that this is a really nice gesture by these CEOs who know that their employees are suffering and probably know that if they don't do this, they probably cannot continue to pay people that are not working. So you kind of can decide for yourself which way you want to go with this. I like to think that there is some humanity here and that they are foregoing their salaries so that they can pay employees.
That is the way I would read it too, in all honesty. I think that they are trying to, look at obviously for the solvency of the company, but in addition to that, I do think that they are looking to make sure that their employees are taken care of, and that's a good thing to see. And it's kind of something that makes you feel good, So that's how I'm reading it as well.
And Bobby Chambers says there should be more of this. I still think it should be more though. Take care of your employees. And Bobby, I think a lot of people agree with you. I think a lot of people agree with you. That's the bottom line. And I do hope that that's kind of what's going on. If it is the other scenario, then Disney's in super, super trouble. And so we'll kind of have to see what happens with this. There's been rumors about Apple looking to buy Disney. I can almost guarantee you Disney's in a much better position to weather the storm than Disney is. They're well known to have cash, where a lot of these other companies do not. But yeah, let's hope, and let's hope that these guys are just trying to do the right thing, try to keep their employees, solvent and that kind of thing, and that they're deciding to make a sacrifice as well, on their part, which is good on them.
Very cool. So I don't really have a Streaming Wars story for this particular episode. I was looking for just positive stuff on the pop culture side, and I didn't really have the chance to really delve too far into finding something for the Streaming Wars. Do you have anything additionally for the Streaming Wars this episode, Eric?
No, I think for time we're good. And by the way, did you see we do have some comments about the cards? So
okay, yeah.
Jane said greatest battles, and then John said the battle card would be sweet, and Punisher. By the way, I was the one who said I like Punisher, and Dave doesn't. Dave, the artist, doesn't like it. And I think it's awesome.
I don't. I like the character. I don't know if I like the card. So,
but I dig your drawing, Dave. I like it. I told you that off the air, and the people are speaking.
All right. So it looks like so far we're kind of tied up. Then, I mean, if we take James's battle card would be sweet, and he says in Punisher, like if we take both of those, then I think right now, what do we have? We've got a tie. We got greatest battles, and we've got, I think, 2 Punishers. So now we're at a tie. All right, so we've narrowed it down. So here's what we got to pick between, folks. We need to figure out if we want to do this. We want to do this greatest battles, and technically this is 2 cards in one. And then I think a lot of you actually on the stream actually watched me draw this card, so you're probably well familiar with it. Or the other one would actually be the Punisher card, which I think a lot of you actually saw me draw as well. So we just need to pick between these. We need to, so let's chime in. Are we thinking Punisher, or are we thinking greatest battles? So greatest battles.
Jane does say Punisher looked great. Jane says Punisher looked great.
All right. So are we good to go ahead and go into our last segment for tonight, or?
Yes, I think so. We obviously had a pretty good time with the writer's room, and that was going pretty good. So I think based on time, we should just get right into it.
Okay. All right. That sounds good. Okay. So I'm going to switch over. So if you would mind sharing my screen. All right. So this is going to be our retrospective, our retro movie review topic of this evening. And then Eric actually selected this one. And please tell the folks watching or listening at home why you selected this film, which is, I'm going to tell you right now, I would highly recommend The Road to Perdition.
Well, as you can see now with the graphic on below the screen, this is our quarantine stream special. So the idea here is that we want to highlight streaming services that are free. Right now, a lot of people are stuck at home. They're isolating. They're in, and they're looking for programming. And what we wanted to do was we really wanted to highlight some of these streaming services that are free and the content that they have. So the first one that we selected, and there was some bias in this, obviously, we selected Tubi. Many of you may know that, well, if you saw the intro, I am associated with the film called Occupants, which is currently Tubi, which is a free streaming service. It is ad-based. And I found out that The Road of Perdition is currently in their rotation. And I thought it would be kind of fun for Dave and I to revisit this film. And that's why we're doing it. So we're trying to promote some of these free streaming services and show the content they have, and give you our take on it so that you folks can enjoy it as well.
Very cool. So here, just real quickly, just a little bit of information on the film Road to Perdition. So the synopsis is: a mob enforcer's son witnesses a murder, forcing him and his father to take to the road. And his father and, well, I've already blown it. We're going to go back. A mob enforcer's son witnesses a murder, forcing him and his father to take to the road, and his father down a path of redemption and revenge. So this film is stars. He looked really familiar. And I didn't realize it at first, but it actually stars, and I'm going to butcher his name. I think it's Tyler Hoechlin. He's actually the CW Arrow versus Superman. Ironically enough, he actually plays Michael Sullivan, the little kid. Also in this, we have Jennifer Jason Leigh as Annie Sullivan. Yep, that's Superman. Jennifer Jason Leigh as Annie Sullivan. Of course, we have the legendary, the great Tom Hanks as Michael Sullivan, I believe, Sr. We have Paul Newman, actually, as John Rooney. We have Daniel Craig, James Bond himself, as Connor Rooney. And it's just a completely stellar cast. This is based on, obviously, the graphic novel series by Max Allan Collins, and this was directed by Sam Mendes. So, as we always do with the retrospective formats, we always start off by talking about how did you first hear about the film? So tell me, Eric, how did you first hear about the film Road to Perdition?
I can't remember exactly how I first heard about it. I'm guessing it was just kind of one of those, because I wasn't looking for it or anything like that. I know that. I think it was just one of those films that it was promoted fairly well, because Tom Hanks is in it, Paul Newman is in it, some big stars, and they were big stars, obviously, even at that time. So I think it was just one of those things where I had some friends that were aware of it. I became aware of it because of advertising and things like that. And I think that's basically what it was. Like I said, I wasn't like anticipating this film or anything like that. I just kind of saw, maybe, I think it was actually a friend that initially recommended it to me, and we decided to go see it together. And so, yeah, it was just sort of through the grapevine. What about you, Dave?
Well, it's interesting because I think I do remember this original series, and I think it was published by Paradox Press, which was a weird sort of, if I remember correctly, like a sort of an indie offshoot label that DC was trying to do. By indie, I mean sort of more independent material. So it's not connected into like a larger universe, like with the DC comics or Marvel, like the 616 universe, any of that kind of thing. So I remembered being somewhat familiar with this material, but I didn't actually read the graphic novels or the comics. And I just remember seeing a poster for the film. And then my wife and I, we both, like Tom Hanks as an actor. And I said, well, this looks interesting. And I just remember us both going and actually seeing this at the movie theater and being thoroughly entertained. One of the things I want to highlight about this film that makes a very lasting impression is actually the score by Thomas Newman. The score is really, really great. It was interesting. Well, we're talking about how he first heard about it. So that's how I first heard about the film is I just remember seeing the poster. I remember being somewhat familiar or having heard of the material before. Road to Perdition, I think one of the follow-up either graphic novel series or some kind of supplement material that actually went with the film actually had illustrations by Jose Luis Garcia Lopez, which those of us who followed us on the show realize that Jose Luis Garcia Lopez is one of my heroes. I have an Atari Force page that hangs in honor actually above my desk here. I'm a huge Garcia Lopez fan. And I remember seeing some images from that and going, oh, that's interesting. So it was mostly the poster and just the idea that Tom Hanks was in this. And it just looked awfully compelling when you think in terms of the Prohibition era and the source material. So that's how I first heard about it. Now we do have a comment here actually by Bobby Chambers. Bobby says, I didn't know this was a graphic novel. Now I have to dig for it. Yes, it was. Max Allan Collins, for those who may not be familiar, for me, Max Allan Collins was the writer of the Dick Tracy comic strip that I was reading back in the day. Max Allan Collins is a great comic writer. He's written a lot of material over the years. Eric, do you have anything in particular you want to highlight from Max Allan Collins?
I have his book right here in my hands. So yeah, obviously it is based on a graphic novel. I believe actually that's not 100% true. I didn't have a chance to research it, but as I recall, actually it was a floppy comic originally. It wasn't just packaged like this originally. I'd have to research that, but that's what my memory tells me. Even though they decided to say it's based on a graphic novel, it was actually like parts. That's how I remember it. But this is what I have. I actually do have the graphic novel version of it. And I do actually have it signed by Max Allan Collins, which is really awesome. Cool. So I had a bit of an obsession with him when this movie came out, and I got to meet him at San Diego Comic-Con the year that the movie came out because I was so into the movie. I sought him out. I found out that Max Allan Collins was there that year and that he was doing panels, and I went straight to his panel. And I think I bought the book on the floor. I think that's where I found the book, is I was able to buy the book on the floor of San Diego Comic-Con, and I brought it right to him. He signed it for me. We had a really nice conversation and everything like that. And I just thought it was so cool because at that time, I was like self-publishing my own books, and I always had these dreams of adapting my books into movies and television shows. And I was like, this is the guy who's doing it. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so I was really kind of mesmerized by him. And I remember his presentation. And one of the really funny things about this is, I think he's the only person that's ever done this. So he wrote the graphic novel, comic book, however it first came out. They made a movie of it. He didn't get to write the screenplay, but they brought him back to do the novelization of the film, which I think is a very unique thing. I don't think there's anybody else that's been in a situation like that, where basically he made the source material, was, basically not really involved with the movie, except maybe like as a consultant, and obviously he was paid royalties and things like that. But then on the back end, they gave him the novelization, which I can't remember if I ever read that. And it would be kind of interesting to see that, because it goes from his original vision to the film vision, and then he has to kind of reconcile that into his version of the novelization. And he talked about that on his panel, what a unique situation that is, because the panel he was on was all people who had their books made into films, television. That was the point of the panel. And he had this unique thing where it's like, yeah, not only did I do that, I wrote the novelization of my own, of the film, that my work was based on. So I always thought that was really unique. And that was one of the other things that I think made me really into him. It was like, wow, that's a really cool story. That's pretty interesting.
No, yeah, that is really cool. Then we have a couple more comments here. It looks like James is saying we should have a new segment, Confessions of a Stalker.
There you go. All those times actually we could probably get the Rogues Gallery to give us some good stuff with that too. All those different fan moments and all those different geeking out moments. Although I will say, with my interaction with Max Allan Collins was very casual. I just went up to him after the panel, talked to him, and had him sign my book, and he just started talking to me. He's a nice guy. You know what I mean? A lot of authors are kind of like one way or the other. They're either like really casual and they're just like another guy and they're just going to talk to another guy, or they're just complete asshole prima donnas. There's like no in between, it seems to me, with authors. They're either like real kind of humble, normal guys, or they're just, full of themselves. And I can say from my experience, Max Allan Collins was very nice. And it wasn't like a crowd of people went up to him either. It was just like me and maybe one other person. And he was happy to talk to us, So, and I have lots of bad celebrity stories, lots of them, from my time when I was a staff member of the Phoenix Comic-Con, and I used to beg people to come to our show when nobody knew about it. Now that's one of the biggest shows in the country. But back in the day, nobody knew about it, and I had people treat me like dirt. So I've got plenty of those bad celebrity stories as well, but I don't tell them because I'm not like that.
Cool. So obviously we talked about how we first heard about Road to Perdition. So in order to make this a proper retrospective, we have to talk about how we feel about the film today, having just recently rewatched it and revisited it. So tell me, Eric, how do you feel about the Road to Perdition today?
It's really interesting because, I remember the film fairly well. I haven't watched it in a very long time, but I do remember it. But there were things that I had forgotten, in the interim since the last time I saw it. And one of the things I had forgotten was how shocking the murder of Tom Hanks's wife and other son, like how shocking that really is. And
it is shocking.
And the way that it's done is actually really tasteful, for lack of a better term. It's shot really well, and it's not gratuitous really in any way, but it really makes you feel it. At least for me, it does. And it's also funny because I know when this movie came out, I didn't have any children, and I have children now. And so it kind of gives you a different perspective for me in that regard as well, putting myself into the shoes of Tom Hanks' character. And they have to do, one of the things that's so beautiful about this film is it's a real film. And they tell the story through images much more than they do through dialogue. So it has to do with expressions. So like Tom Hanks and Paul Newman's acting is just like superb. It's like top notch because there's not a lot of exposition. There's not a lot of explaining. They tell the story through the images, which I think has to do with the source material being a graphic novel. You can kind of feel the comic book influence, and it makes the film so much better. And it tells the story in a way that's just, you just really feel it. And they don't have to do a lot of dialogue or exposition, and you feel it. And like for me, that scene, I really felt it because, as a father, you think of a situation like that. Well, one of your children has been brutally murdered, and part of you probably wants to die with them. But at the same time, you've got another child that's still alive. And what are you supposed to do in that situation? So it's a huge kind of moral conundrum, you know what I mean? And it's really interesting. And I thought Tom Hanks did a good job with that because Tom Hanks plays obviously a hitman in this movie. And he's obviously a very complicated individual. Let's put it that way. He's a very complicated individual. And on the one hand, he's this tough, emotionless hitman who doesn't hesitate to take somebody out if he feels he needs to. But on the other hand, you have this situation where now, his family members have been murdered, and Tom Hanks has this great reaction where he's sobbing, you know what I mean, and he's so affected by what has happened, and it just provides such a depth to the character. It really just provides such a depth to the character. So it's interesting going back and watching it now. Like I said, as a person, as a father, and the fact that when I watched it before, I wasn't, and watching some of those scenes because they really hit me. And then the whole dynamic of this man running around basically on a vendetta at the same time while he has to protect his son. And then and beyond that, he has to enlist his son to help him, which I think is also really kind of an interesting part of the story, is that his son can't be passive in this. His son has to help him in order for him to achieve what he needs to achieve.
Well, what's interesting about this film, revisiting it, that I don't remember, I think, being quite as aware of, is the connections, and I don't know if Maximilian Collins talked about this, but there's an interesting connection because this film, to me, in terms of the story concept anyway, feels a little bit influenced by Lone Wolf and Cub. Eric, are you familiar with Lone Wolf and Cub?
I am familiar with it, yes, but I have not read it. I'm familiar with it, but I haven't read it.
So in Lone Wolf and Cub, it's a classic. There was a series of films, and in addition to the series of films, there was actually a really great, manga series that came out years ago. And the basic tenet of it is that there's basically an executioner who's in service to a lord, his entire clan that he serves, as well as his master, is basically executed, and then he is supposed to kill himself, but instead he decides to go out for revenge and basically pay back the people that basically took from him essentially his life, and he has to take with him his young child. So watching Road to Perdition, I couldn't help but to draw connections to not only Lone Wolf and Cub, but recently we had reviewed and discussed The Mandalorian. And I thought it was really interesting that there's this interesting through line with some of these kind of stories. So having revisited Road to Perdition, this is an incredibly well-crafted film. If you haven't seen it in a little while, I highly recommend revisiting it. I do own this actually on DVD. It's been a few years since I've watched it. And actually rewatching it, I was mesmerized and taken aback by how wonderfully crafted and shot this film is. I totally agree with Eric. It's told more through the visuals than dialogue, but it's so beautifully and wonderfully staged. The acting is top notch. The score, as I said, from Thomas Newman is just haunting and beautiful and very emotional. The direction from Sam Mendes is absolutely top notch. I had forgotten that Daniel Craig was actually in this, and was kind of shocked to see him.
Very different kind of role. Very different kind of role.
Oh, yeah.
You can see what an amazing actor he is as well. Because I mean, he's almost, other than his appearance, he's like unidentifiable. I mean, that character is like that's not James Bond, that's for sure.
That's for sure. And I was also amazed too, because I know this takes place during Prohibition, and I remember there being a connection to, Capone and the Chicago mob and everything. But it's just the whole thing is so well told and so well crafted. Jude Law is also in this film as well. I didn't mention Jude Law earlier. Gosh, it's just such a wonderfully put together film.
And Jude Law is amazing in this too.
Oh yeah,
he doesn't have that sort of pretty boy kind of thing at all that he normally has in so many of his other roles. That sort of dashing leading man kind of thing. No, that's not Jude Law in this movie at all. At all, very psychotic, crazy character, and he does a very good job bringing that character to life. I'll also say this is probably one of the most beautiful. This movie has probably one of the most beautiful murder scenes you will ever see.
Yeah,
I mean, they actually cut all of the audio except for the score, and it's completely silent except for the score, and the cinematography is beautiful. It's like the most beautiful massacre you will ever see on film.
Yeah,
it's amazing. It's amazing how well it's done. And again, the story is actually pretty much told through Paul Newman's face, because there is no dialogue. It goes completely silent, and all you can hear is the music as this massacre happens. It's a massacre, and I get chills. I remember seeing it in the theater. If there's any way you could see this on the big screen, it's definitely worth seeing on the big screen too, because it's haunting, and it like I said, it's like the most beautiful murder ever put on film. It's crazy. It's crazy.
No, yeah, and I seriously, I mean, if you haven't watched this film in a little while, like Eric was saying, it's in rotation on Tubi. Definitely check this out. I cannot recommend this film enough. It is just so well acted. It is so well shot. It is so well staged. The art direction is top notch. It's fun because it's a period piece set during the time of Capone with the Chicago mob. Just everything, the score, just everything about the story. Like this is cinema. In my mind, at its kind of its highest form, and it's just so well done. And then to know also too, for those of us that are into it, to know that this is inspired and comes from our comic book series as well. It's just another, and it's interesting too, because you wouldn't think of this as coming from a comic book series. And that's the thing that's really great about this too. It shows how much really wonderful source material there is that can be adapted and introduced to a new audience in the hopes that they'll backtrack and find the original graphic novels or find the original comic book, stories and delve into that world and see where it's similar and see where it's different and just kind of get lost in this just really interesting world and what's happening with the story. I can't recommend this movie enough. Would you agree, Eric, that you would recommend that people should check out Road to Perdition on Tubi?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. A big recommendation. Josh mentions, by the way, that it did win the Oscar for cinematography. And I think I do remember that it did win an Oscar, well-deserved Oscar for cinematography, because the cinematography in this film is amazing. It's excellent. It's one of the best shot films I think I've ever seen. I would actually compare it to The Joker in terms of cinematography and just the use of imagery in telling the story. And again, it also kind of shows the source material, being that it was a graphic novel. You can kind of feel that there. Bobby brings up an interesting point in terms of the narrative of the film. He said it's hard not to wonder if what happened to Michael Sullivan was just karma. And I will say that that's kind of, I think, the message of the movie. It's unlike Picard, which the message is that being human is to die, and dying makes you human. This movie is all about the idea of killing, and it's also about the idea of whether it's not really a story of redemption. It's a story of these violent men, the lives they lead, and sort of that life by the sword, live by the sword, die by the sword, because that's basically what happens to these characters. But then the story is really about the boy, you know what I mean, and the son, and how does he fit into all of this? There's a very interesting undertone in this movie that basically Tom Hanks' character kind of resents his son in a way because he feels he's too much like himself. And that's a profound thing because he's a hitman. And he does not want his son to be like him, but he sees a lot of his son in him. And that's really what the core of the movie is about. I won't give away that ending in case someone hasn't seen it. But that's really what it's about, is that it's about that relationship that is his son going to be like him or not? And there's this beautiful exchange between Paul Newman's character and Tom Hanks' character, where I love it, where they have this exchange after everything's gone to hell. They have this exchange, this moment together, and Paul Newman's character tells him there's only one thing basically for certain, that there's nobody in this room going to heaven. They know what they are. They know who they are. They know they're bad people, including Tom Hanks. Okay, and it's kind of interesting seeing Tom Hanks in a role like this because he's like the nicest hitman you'll ever meet, but he's still a hitman. Right. He's still a violent man. And I love that line because there's a lot of morality in this. And I will mention there's some big differences between the graphic novel and the movie. And one of the most striking differences is that in the graphic novel, we get to see the son grown up. And a story that Max Allan Collins relayed about that was that originally the grown-up version of the son was going to be played by Jack Lemmon. And Jack Lemmon actually had already died by the time this movie came out. And as far as I know, this was the last movie that Paul Newman made. So you can kind of imagine the emotional impact if Jack Lemmon had also appeared at the end of the story. So if you are interested in the graphic novel, I will tell you it's very different. A lot of the core elements are there. For instance, Paul Newman's character is sort of like a father figure, and he almost comes across as sympathetic. That character in the graphic novel is not sympathetic at all. He's just he's just a heartless, kind of Godfather type, but he's not sympathetic. So that there are some very different directions they took from the core material. And I remember Max Allan Collins talking about that and being okay with it. Some writers, they get really upset when there's any kind of change in their source material, but he he liked it. He said he loved the film. I remember him saying that he was gonna keep beating that dead horse, as long as he possibly could, because he was pretty excited about it. But it is very different. I will tell you that if the graphic novel is very different from the film in a lot of ways.
And for me, sometimes that's the thing that makes taking the time to actually find the original source material and read it, that makes it entertaining and enjoyable, is the differences between the two. I often talk about how much I love the Gold Key Star Trek comics, the original ones, because those comic books are so wildly inaccurate and so different actually from the series, because the artists and the writers working on it, all they had was some stills and some synopses. Sometimes they hadn't even actually had the chance to actually see any of the episodes yet. And you see essentially Spock, like what looks like he's in essentially like a World War II era submarine, and the landing party's got canteens as a part of their regular gear when they go on away missions. Is it accurate to Trek? No, but it's wildly entertaining and it's fun. And in a weird way, it's like you can take something that you enjoyed or something you like and experience it in a new way, yet you're still in that same world. I sometimes don't look at things and go, as long as it's well done, I don't mind if they make minor changes or they change things. It's just
that's basically what Max was saying about this, because I've seen authors go completely the opposite way, where they're just like, oh, they butchered my vision and blah blah blah. You know what I mean? But then again, I think a lot of especially a lot of people who write novels, they don't understand television or film at all. I really think that. I think we saw that with when we were talking about The City on the Edge of Forever and the original idea. It's just like you get this sense, yeah, this guy's a good writer. I mean, he writes good stories, but this is not going to work on television at all. You know what I mean? Like, it's just not going to work. So sometimes they just don't have that sensibility. Now Micah has a comment, and she said, even though he really is the protagonist in this film, can you think of any other movie that Hanks played this much of a bad guy? And no, I can't think of any other movie where he played anywhere near a bad guy. He's kind of always like that everyman, you know what I mean? That, Jimmy Stewart type, as they say, Yeah, I can't think of another film where he played any kind of a character like that.
True. And then if you notice, Bobby Chambers echoes the same thing over here in the Rogues Gallery. He says, not a single one comes to mind. Good point. And I'd have to say, I totally agree. I can't think of another film where Tom Hanks played this much of a bad guy. But it's interesting about this role in this film is it adds to the amazing legacy of Tom Hanks too, because it is such a departure for him to play this kind of role. So yeah, it's interesting because I was watching this film and thinking about the kind of great performances that he turned in when you look at, Captain Phillips, for example, or you think about Big, it's just such an amazing film legacy too, but it is fun to see him in such a different role. But it's,
although I would say, as I said before, he's like the most sympathetic hitman like ever. You know what I mean? So he still has that Tom Hanks thing, which works in the film. It kind of helps the film because, he really is a very bad person, quite frankly. But like I like to say that, serial killers are still nice to their moms, because a lot of them are. People forget that. They think that because someone is a murderous person or whatever, that they're all bad, quote unquote. Well, that's not always the case. They still might have friends and all that kind of stuff. And in this case, he has a family and he loves his family, but he is also a murderer. He is paid money to kill people. That's what he does.
Right. Like I said, I definitely recommend people check this out on Tubi. Again, we're recommending Tubi primarily because it is a free service. It is ad-based. It won't cost you anything to actually watch Road to Perdition. So it's a part of our, what were you calling it again, Eric? Our quarantine special?
Quarantine stream. Quarantine stream special.
Yeah. So we're not being paid by Tubi to recommend this. We're only recommending it only from the standpoint of it's a way that you can watch a great film, and it's not going to cost you anything extra. And we want to, kind of highlight those fun ways that people can find fun and enjoyable entertainment. So, oh, and then Mike actually calls out.
That's the key right now.
I was going to say, Micah over here in the gallery also calls out Philadelphia, and then she says, not that he played a bad guy, but just echoing another one of the great roles that he has played. Yeah.
Yeah, that is a great film as well.
Powerful. Yeah. Powerhouse.
That's a great film as well.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay.
And then I do want to say, hold on 1 second. I do want to say, as far as Tubi, I primarily stream on my PlayStation 4, and this stream went much smoother than CBS All Access or Disney Plus. I have issues with Disney Plus, all sorts of issues with Disney Plus on the PS4, and I've had some problems with CBS All Access. Tubi worked just fine.
Yeah, and I've mentioned before I've been having issues with CBS All Access just on my Samsung television. And when I tried to report it, I got a weird bounce back. And then when I tried to use their stupid email submission, that didn't work either. So there you go.
And by the way, unlike, because they're saying Picard is free now, well, you still have to give your credit card. You don't have to do that with Tubi. I just want to point that out.
Well, there you go. And then my mom actually mentions, looks like over here in the Rogues Gallery, she says that Xfinity On Demand offers it through Tubi.
Oh, that's cool.
Something else fun there that you can check on Tubi. Check it out. So very cool. Do we think that's good for this episode of the Retro Rogues, Eric?
Yes, I think.
Awesome. Very cool. So if that's okay with you, I guess we'll go ahead and we'll set it up and we'll go over to the outro. So before we go to the outro real quick, it looks like the general consensus is everyone's wanting to do the Marvel Greatest Battles card. That does seem to be the general consensus. So we will do this card as the prize for those of you who took the time this evening actually to contribute and comments. And I think we're going to figure out who that is, and we're going to announce it on the website, just because I haven't had a chance to actually go through and figure out who all was actually involved. I mean, I know who most of you are, but I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through, look at everyone who commented, and I'll actually announce it on the Facebook page. So if you just keep an eye out on the Facebook page, Eric and I will discuss it. We will draw a name out of the Hulk bucket. I would go grab it. I actually have it's like a green Hulk head thing, and you put Halloween candy in it and something, and we usually draw names out of it. So that's probably what we'll do this evening, and we will announce it on the Facebook page. So just keep an eye on the Facebook page. We will announce it this evening here shortly after the show. So I want to thank everyone for commenting over in the Rogues Gallery. So let's go ahead and we'll do the outro now. So I want to thank you for watching this episode of the Retro Rogues Live. Again, my name is Dave Beatty, and I have been one of your hosts. If you're curious to see more of my art, learn more about me, you can do all those fun things at my website. That's at davebeatty.com. That's www.davebeaty.com. I also encourage people, please, if you're watching the show right now, you're not too terribly familiar with me, you're not already following me or have sent a friend request, whatever, on Facebook, please do that. I have been spending quite a few nights during the week actually drawing live for people to see for free, just doing fun stuff. You can see me creating some of these sketch cards we give away on the show, as well as answering questions, whether they're industry questions, whether they're art-related questions. I'm talking about my process and how I'm actually creating these things for those people that are interested in that. I'm always available to answer questions and to be of service. So please, definitely, if you're not doing that, please do that, and hopefully we will have something fun to talk about soon as far as that is concerned. So tell me, Eric, please let the people know where they can learn more about you on the interwebs.
Well, I'm most accessible on Twitter. That's where I'm most active. It's my normal handle, BassGod14, BassGod14. My DMs are open, so if you have show suggestions, I'm always open to that. That's the easiest way to find me. That's also my YouTube. It's also the Twitch channel. And then Man of Sam had an interesting thing here. He said, in the movie Cloud Atlas, Tom Hanks, among various among various roles in the movie, played the predatory Dr. Henry Goose, who poisoned his victims. And with that, we will leave our viewers with the last word.